The snows of late winter had not yet softened when the tower bell tolled across the courtyard of Winterfell, its brazen voice so heavy with grief that ravens startled from the ramparts as though hurled into flight by sorrow itself. In the Godswood, where the air still tasted of ice and iron, the ancient weirwood's red leaves whispered in the bare light of a pale blue dawn. Its carved face, older than dynasties, seemed to bleed fresh tears for the boy laid out upon the stone bier before it. Bran Stark was 10 years of age and no more, flesh blanched, lips stilled forever in a half-formed dream that would never find its waking end. His small hands were folded atop the dire wolf pelt that wrapped him breast to heel, and a single white rose rested between his fingers, trembling whenever the wind sighed through the branches above. Lord Eddard Stark stood at the foot of his son's bier with snow melting upon his shoulders, turning his gray cloak a darker shade. Ned's face, etched by frost and fatigue, betrayed nothing but the hard-edged calm of a man who must bear witness for a household that still needed a lord more than it needed an orphaned father's tears. Beside him knelt Lady Catelyn, her auburn hair half unbound and spangled with ice crystals. She had no tears left, the night had taken them hour by hour until her throat burned hollow and raw. In their place came a naked ache coiled deep in her bones, too vast for weeping, too bright for rage. A hush fell as Maester Luwin stepped forward, the soft clatter of his chain echoing faintly. He began the ritual words, a plea to the old gods and the new alike, voice trembling yet clear. The family gathered close, Robb, tall and red-haired, cheeks still rounded by youth, yet shoulders already drawn square, Sansa, pale as ivory, fingers clenched at her skirts, little Arya, eyes swollen, her hair a tangled snarl. And Rickon, no more than 3, confused and whimpering into the black fur of his dire wolf pup. Even Jon Snow, sworn to leave the next dawn for the wall, stood beyond the circle, gloved hands clasped tight as though to keep his grief from spilling. The direwolves sensed it first, an ancestral cadence older than Winterfell's stones. Grey Wind, Lady, Nymeria, Shaggy Og, and Ghost began a low-throated keening that rose into the pure, mournful song of the north. It filled the wood, poured between pillars of oak and pine, and soared upward until the last note shattered against the vault of clouded sky. When the wolf's cry died, only the wind remained, rattling dead leaves like brittle prayers. Maester Luwin's voice wavered. Brandon Stark, of the blood of first men, may the old gods guard his soul in the shade of their great boughs until the end of all winters. He let the silence claim them, grim and frigid, while Ned's gray eyes found Catelyn's. They shared a look of raw, silent promise. They would bury the boy together as they had brought him into life. Servants bore Bran's body to the crypts, down twisting steps carved by hands long vanished. At the empty niche prepared for him, Ned placed the iron-shod torch into its bracket and stepped aside so Catelyn might kiss her son's brow one last time. Her lips lingered, tasting the cold hush of stone, then withdrew. Robb closed Bran's pale eyelids with a tenderness that belied the breadth of his hands. When they sealed the sarcophagus lid, the thud echoed like a heart's last beat. No one spoke as they climbed back toward daylight. Outside, snowflakes drifted soft as secrets. That evening the great hall stood hollow despite the hearth's roaring fire. Trenchers of venison stew cooled untouched, the hall's usual clamor had sunk into a murmuring gloom. Even Arya had no appetite for adventure, sitting hunched in her seat, staring at the table reflection of the flames. Sansa watched her sister from across the board with the wariness of one who has glimpsed grief's many shapes and found none bearable. High on the dais, Ned conferred with his bannermen, Ser Roderick Castle, Hallis Malin, and the great Jon Umber, about patrols, granary stores, and the inevitable tightening of belts should winter deepen sooner than expected. They spoke in low voices, but sorrow made Ned's every word feel leaden, as though each syllable cost a breath of his remaining strength. Across from him, Catelyn addressed letters of thanks for condolences, her quill scratching with mechanical precision, while her mind drifted like smoke. Jon Snow lingered near the back pillars, eyes tracking the interplay between Robb and his father. 2 days passed, the bastard boy had dreamed of the wall as an escape. Now it felt like a sentence of exile. His love for Bran, fierce and uncomplicated, burned like a live coal in his chest. He yearned to speak to Ned alone, to ask for permission? Forgiveness? He did not know. Only that leaving felt treacherous, an abdication of brotherhood at the hour it mattered most. Yet Lord Stark had commanded that he depart at first light with Benjen. Duty before heart as ever. The next dawn, before even the roosters roused, Jon walked the quiet halls to Bran's crypt. Shadows lay thick as pitch, the torch in his hand casting long, lurid shapes. He knelt before the sarcophagus, fingers grazing its cold lid. I should have been there. The whisper vanished into dank air. Somewhere far above, water dripped each pat a slow-ticking clock. When Jon emerged again, eyes rimmed red, the castle blushed purple with first light. The King's Road stretched south like a gray ribbon threaded through snowfields and sleeping forests. Lord Stark's procession set out a fortnight later, 24 mounted guards, a dozen wagons with supplies and gifts of the north, and the first direwolf ever to tread so far south of Moat Cailin since the Age of Heroes. Gray wind trotted beside Robb's mare, ears pricked, breath ghosting in the chill. Robb's shoulders squared beneath his dark blue cloak. Too quickly had boyhood fallen away, leaving the breadth of a young man untested by battle but tempered by loss. He would remain to rule as Lord of Winterfell until his father's return. Catelyn, though her heart hammered northward, rode beside Ned for the first leg to Moat Cailin. At dusk, camped beneath sentinel pines, she found him staring toward the horizon. "It will be many moons before you look upon Winterfell again," she said, "and every one darker for what lies buried behind us." Ned replied, voice smoke-rough. He clasped her hand. "Keep Robb steady. He is brave, but grief makes a sword with two edges." They spoke then of small things. Grain tithes, Rickon's nightmares, Arya's rogue lessons with Syrio, because the larger sorrow was too unwieldy to bear. Before dawn they kissed once, swiftly. Ned tasted snowmelt on her lips, salt on her lashes. Then he turned south toward King's Landing's gilded snares, never knowing the path would soon splinter with betrayals untold. Catelyn watched until the last rider dipped from sight and the distant jingle of bridles stilled. Only then did she ride northward again, pressing her mount hard, yearning for the familiar gray sprawl of Winterfell's walls and the children left within. Summer wine sunlight dappled the rose gardens of the Red Keep when Eddard Stark arrived in the capital, but to Ned the city smelled of carrion and cruelty. The bells chimed their hollow welcome, banners of Lannister crimson and Baratheon gold fluttered like arrogant tongues above the walls. In the throne room, Robert Baratheon embraced him with bearish warmth, yet Ned felt a gulf yawning between them wider than the neck, one a grieving father, the other a restless king who brandished his appetites like weapons. On the dais, Queen Cersei's green eyes skimmed Ned's gray-streaked hair and plain wool cloak, pausing upon the hand's silver brooch pinned at his breast. She inclined her head, a gesture measured to the grain of duty, devoid of grace. Beside her, the Kingslayer lounged, golden and radiant as a summer storm. Jaime's expression flickered ever so slightly when the hand's arrival cut short a private jest he was sharing with little Prince Tommen, and for an instant Ned glimpsed the casual cruelty behind the knight's smile. They knew, Ned thought, not of Jon Arryn's secrets yet, but something darker. Something that echoed in the silent places of his mind whenever he recalled Bran's broken body sprawled on cobblestones. He had accepted the story of a tragic fall in Winterfell's broken tower, yet newly sharpened suspicion scraped through his thoughts like a whetstone against steel. Why? What reason had Bran to climb on a day so cold and sky so brittle? And who had been with him atop that ruin? Yet Bran's lips would never part to voice the answer. Ned suppressed the tremor in his gut. He would unravel the truth quietly, piece by piece, in corridors where even the spider's spies might slip. In Winterfell, the first thaw of spring came late. Frozen rivers cracked, ice groaned beneath morning sun. Yet within the great hall, life stirred. Robb held audiences, listened to petitions from distant vassals, and wrote scroll upon scroll to his father in the south. Catelyn watched proud and fearful all at once. Her eldest born had grown taller since Bran's death, voice edging into deeper timbre. When he sparred with Ser Roderick, sweat darkening his tunic, the sword in his hand cut the air with a decisiveness that felt older than his 15 years. Rickon, confused by absence and death in equal measure, roamed with shaggy dog at heel, temper quick to ignite. Sansa stitched by candlelight in her chamber, humming half-remembered songs of court. Arya vanished into secret nooks, practicing needle-thin thrusts with a wooden blade and dreaming of venturing beyond northern snows. Some nights, Catelyn stood in the godwood beneath stars iced across black velvet sky, her breath silver in moonlight. She whispered to Bran, boy of laughter and fearless leaps, asking him to watch over those still breathing. And in the hush of that sacred place, she fancied an answer carried upon wind, not words, but a sense of presence, fleeting as the gleam of an owl's eye before twilight swallows flight. Across the narrow sea, in a smoking ruin of Valyrian stone, a black-winged shadow wheeled over molten vents that stank of brimstone, Daenerys Targaryen's dragons, still small yet hungry, learning flight. Cold winds blew east from Westeros, but the mother of dragons felt none of them. Her path, though seemingly distant, already bent toward the realms of men, and Bran Stark's death, one boy among thousands, rippled into currents unseen, tugging at the fates of kings and queens alike. In the Red Keep, Ned moved cautiously. His inquiries into Jon Arryn's last days led him through cobwebbed records, into smithies where bastards with Baratheon eyes hammered steel, and finally toward whispers of treasonous lineage. Each revelation nested inside the next, a serpent coiled within a serpent. Meanwhile, a letter from Catelyn arrived in his solar, sealed in the wax of the dire wolf. Robb had received word from lordlings near the neck of increased raider activity, bannerless men preying upon travelers. Greyjoy reavers? Bolton sellswords? The missive offered no certainty. But Ned's knuckles bled white against its edge. The north was stirring even as he rooted through King's Landing's rot. Had Bran lived, the boy might have served as Ned's eyes through skin-changing dreams, guiding him with spectral clarity. Without the boy's budding gift, the Stark patriarch now walked blindfolded through vipers. One eve, Peter Baelish joined Ned upon an open gallery overlooking the city. Torches glittered across rooftops like an errant constellation. "You seem troubled, my lord," the mockingbird observed, voice soft as silk and twice as dangerous. "Mayhap King's Landing's pleasures do not suit a man of ice and stone." "I trust little in pleasures that mask daggers," Ned replied. "And yet daggers have two edges, do they not? One for stabbing, one for parrying. Learn to wield them both, and you may survive this court." Littlefinger's smile twitched. "The game grows bloodier each day, and they say ghosts move across its board." Ned frowned. "Ghosts? Why, the ghost of Jon Arryn, naturally. And perhaps the ghost of a broken boy who fell from a tower's height? Dead children whisper loudest, I found. When one learns why they fell silent, allies become foes and foes, allies." Ned's hand crept unconsciously to the pommel of Ice's smaller traveling companion sword. He forced it still. "If you know aught of that child's fall, say it plainly." Baelish's eyes gleamed in torchlight. "Plain speech is for small folk. In courts, truth fetches a higher price wrapped in riddles." He bowed with exaggerated grace. "Seek out the armorer Tobelmont. Ask him to show you his apprentice with hair like ink and eyes like midnight. The boy's name is Gendry. See what likeness he bears the late Jon Arryn's questions." Ned watched Baelish glide away, cloak fluttering like a raven's wing. Only after the master of coin vanished did Ned realize his breath had frosted in the evening air, though the spring night was warm. At Castle Black, Jon Snow's days settled into a rhythm of ice and iron. Dawn sword drills beneath Ser Alistair Thorne's withering sneer, midday meals of lard stiff bread and thin stew, night watches upon the great wall where starfire shimmered upon fields of endless white. Yet sleep brought dreams of shadows taller than giants, unfurling beyond the tree-lean north of the wall. In those dreams, ghosts prowled between marble trunks. From the wolf's eyes, Jon beheld a blackness moving with silent purpose. He would wake heart-racing, fingers curled about the hilt of a dagger he did not recall drawing. Samwell Tarly noticed. One frigid dawn they shared watch upon the east parapet, breath pluming silver. Sam's voice trembled. "Do you believe the tales, Jon? Of others riding the dark?" "I believe the wind lashes secrets at us we dare not heed." Jon rubbed Ghost's pale ears. The dire wolf stared into the foreboding forest. "And I believe winter comes faster than men prepare." He did not yet know that Bran's death had severed a thread binding his own destiny to the great weirwood network of memory. Without the three-eyed raven to guide him, Jon's path would stray into mires of doubt and decisions less certain. In Riverrun's feasting hall, Lord Hoster Tully coughed up blood streaks into a silk kerchief, eyes glazing with mortal resignation. Catelyn's letters reached him slow as molasses. Bran's death cut him to the bone. Word spread along river and road alike. The Starks mourned, the North watched. Frey bannermen whispered that tragedy could jar alliances loose. Riverrun's heir, Edmure, swore to ride north come harvest to pay respects, but the twins bristled with unsubtle greed. Walder Frey weighed every death like coin on a scale. A wolf pack's grief might yet prove leverage if handled deftly. His mind schemed beneath thinning white hair. Summer waned toward autumn. In Winterfell, the castle rang with newfound diligence. Robb signed edicts, dispatched Eddard's trusted men to inspect holdfasts, and personally patrolled the wolf's forest border. One dusk he met with Theon Greyjoy atop the battlements. Theon smirked, folding arms across his fine leather jerkin. "You carry yourself like a lord," groaned Stark. "I am lord in all but name," Robb replied, though his voice betrayed unease. "Winterfell must stand strong. Theon's smile crooked. Aye, but strong men sometimes need iron at their back. He tapped the kraken sigil clasp at his cloak. Balon Greyjoy never forgets a debt owed. The North once crushed the Iron Islands, someday the Ironborn may seek repayment. Robb's blue eyes sharpened. You are my brother in all but blood, Theon. But if the islands threaten my people, I will answer with steel. Laughter echoed, but deeper currents tugged at Theon's pride. Years a hostage, yet still he yearned for Pike's salt-bitten cliffs. Bran's death had stirred in him an awareness of mortality, life too fragile to waste in another lord's hall. Robb failed to notice the flicker of storm in his friend's gaze. Far south, Ned Stark broke open a hardcover ledger in the Tower of the Hand. The spine cracked, releasing a puff of dust. Inside, Jon Arryn's meticulous script cataloged every royal bastard in King's Landing by name, trade, and mother's whereabouts. In the margin of the final page, Arryn had scrawled a single, chilling line, "The seed is strong." That night, Ned dreamed of Bran lying still among the twisted beams of the broken tower. The boy's bones seemed fused to the rough stone, and when Ned knelt, Bran's eyes opened, black and bottomless, whispering, "The seed is strong, and the branches rot." He woke clammy, sunrise bleeding across the shutters. A letter from Winterfell arrived wrapped in white ribbon. Sansa wrote of sewing lessons and a lute Robb had gifted her. Arya added a page scrawled crude, "I am practicing every day with needle. I will be stronger than any Southron knight." And in a careful hand, Catelyn included a final note, "Rickon calls for you at night. He does not understand why his father has gone away and Bran cannot rise to play. Come home soon, my love." Ned's heart bruised anew. But distances in Westeros stretched like drawn sinew between what one loved and what one must do. He penned assurances, "Guard the North, trust Robb," and closed with a father's pledge, "I will come home, or my bones will." He sealed the words with wax stamped by dire wolf and moon. Beneath the shadow of the Eyrie, Lisa Arryn clutched her young son to her breast, paranoia spiraling. She learned through whispering ravens that Ned Stark prodded the hornet's nest of her late husband's death. She vowed the hand would not draw her into treacheries she endured once before. And so she set her walls thicker, her gates higher. Without Bran's living witness, Catelyn felt no urgency to ride south and seize Tyrion Lannister on the Kingsroad. Bran had died, but none suspected deliberate murder. The spark that would have ignited war between lion and wolf smoldered instead beneath layers of politics, awaiting another flare. The game changed, but the end remained sharp. On a humid dusk in King's Landing, Ned confronted Cersei among whispering willows in the godwood of the Red Keep. He spoke of her children's parentage, Jon Arryn's findings, and the poison coiled in her bed. The Queen's eyes flashed emerald flame. "When you play the Game of Thrones, Stark, you risk your children's lives as surely as your own. Are you prepared to wager?" Ned, mindful of Bran's stone tomb, steeled himself. "I will not gamble with innocence. I will bring Robert the truth and let him decide." Cersei's smile broke like brittle ice. "Then we shall see whose truth prevails." Robert Baratheon never heard that truth. A boar's tusk found his belly during a hunt, but some whispered wine soured by Lannister meddling dulled the king's reflexes. On his deathbed, Robert named Ned Protector of the Realm. Yet before Ned could secure royal legitimacy for Stannis Baratheon, Pycelle, Baelish, and the Kingsguard seized the throne room for Joffrey. In the chaos, Ser Jaime confronted Ned upon the steps of the Great September, not with swords, but with a cold threat. "You lost a son to gravity, Stark. Lose no more to folly." It was Littlefinger's dagger at Ned's throat that ended the standoff. Betrayal sliced more keenly than Valyrian steel. The cells beneath the Red Keep swallowed Ned's honor into damp stone walls. Back in Winterfell, a raven arrived on midnight wings. Robb read the sealed command in the Great Hall, voice shaking. "Eddard Stark, Lord of Winterfell, confessed treason against His Grace King Joffrey and awaits the mercy of the crown." Gasps flared like sparks among assembled vassals. Grey Wind lifted his muzzle in a low growl that seemed to reverberate in Robb's marrow. Catelyn clutched the parchment. "This cannot be true." Robb's youthful face hardened into Winter's mask. "Whether true or treachery, we ride south to free my father or bring his remains home." The bannermen roared assent. The North stirred a second time, this time not in mourning, but in rage. The drums of war, delayed by Bran's silent grave, now pounded with resounding fury. A storm gathered across Westeros, born of secrets no longer anchored by a boy who might have bridged past and present. The three-eyed raven would never rise within Bran's eyes to weave guidance through the tapestry of fate. Instead, the threads tangled unguided. Robb's vengeance marched, Catelyn's faith wavered, Jon's purpose darkened, and Daenerys's dragons grew ever broader wings. Beyond the wall, ancient ice cracked and blue eyes opened in restless legions. With no green seer to watch and warn, their advance would one day find the realms of men unprepared. And thus, on the anvil of Bran's death, the song of ice and fire forged itself anew, its melody forever altered, every chord a lament for the boy who never awoke to dream the world whole again. Robb Stark gathered his bannermen in the square of Winterfell at dawn, when frosted air shimmered gold upon the forge fires and the last stars bled out. The ramparts bristled with figures, grooms leading destriers fit for long rides, washerwomen tying bundles to wagons, old men leaning on spears that had outlived two kings. A hush, reverent as prayer, settled when Robb strode forward in wolf fur cloak and mail of blackened steel. Grey wind patted at his side, huge as a small horse now, eyes pale as new ice. The direwolf's presence steadied Robb's voice, yet every syllable carried the raw edge of boyhood not quite sundered from the man he must become. He spoke of oaths, of the honor owed a captive father, of treachery that could not stand while northern hearts yet beat. His bannermen answered with the thunder of sword hills on shields, Karstarks, Glovers, Manderleys, Hornwoods, names as old as the first frost. Ser Roderick Castle laid the master-at-arms hand upon Robb's pauldron. A wolf's howl is no less fierce for cracking, he murmured, meaning Bran and the grief they carried southbound, meaning Robb's voice that wavered when he named his little brother one final time. By high sun they rode. The gatehouse echoed with the jangle of harness and greylag horns with the metallic scent of anticipation. Catelyn watched from the battlements beyond Maester Luwin's shoulder, one arm around Rickon who clutched her skirts, the other hand knotted white upon the stones. She had sewn Robb a banner with the dire wolf rampant, its silver thread catching each shifting ray of daylight. "Go and come home," she whispered, though only the wind heard. Lady Stark of Winterfell had bartered fear for resolve now. She would hold the castle for her son's return or see its walls dashed to rubble around her. Sansa stood beside her mother, face pale, fingers trembling upon the coarse stone. When Robb glanced back once, a fleeting heartbeat, their eyes met. She lifted the half-rolled banner, letting the dire wolf unfurl so he might know they loved him. Then the hoofbeat swallowed everything. North of the castle, Arya climbed a ruined watchtower with Nymeria bounding ahead. She watched the column snake south until banners blended with heat haze. A storm brewed inside her, equal parts pride and fury at being left behind. She vowed to practice thrice daily with needle, next time she would not be deemed too young. When dusk cooled the sky, she crept to Bran's crypt, lit a tallow candle, and whispered stories to her lost brother, of heroes who never yielded, of wolves that hunted giants, of little girls that learned to fight. In the black vaulted cells beneath the Red Keep, Eddard Stark paced the dank length of his fetter chain. Each shuffle of iron against sandstone bit heedless grooves in his sanity. He clung to memories of Winterfell's hearth crackle, Bran's ringing laughter, the scent of pine and fresh-turned earth, anchors against the sewer stench of betrayal. Varys descended sometimes, slippered feet soft as cat paws, candle cupped within a fat-ringed hand. He spoke in riddles, of storms gathering, of life preserved through silence, of a realm that might yet be spared civil war if Ned would bend. Ned bent only long enough to ask after his daughters. Varys lied artfully, Sansa safe in the Red Keep, Arya lost but being sought by good men. Ned's heart quaked at the thought of Arya loose in a city whose shadows were lined with knives. Still, he would not sign the false confession thrust before him by Ser Boros Blunt. "Joffrey is no Baratheon," he growled, voice hoarse. "When truth is poisoned, all men drink corruption." Boros laughed, left him to the rats. Above, the small council fractured. Renly Baratheon fled in the night with a host of Southron knights, proclaiming himself king upon sunrise. Stannis smoldered across the narrow sea, sending ravens that bore accusations sharper than any blade. Littlefinger seldom attended meetings, his coin and knives both wandering. In his absence, Queen Cersei ruled through fear and the brittle cannonade of Joffrey's fits. One evening Tyrion Lannister rode into the capital from the Vale, where war's first match had never been struck, thanks to Lady Catelyn remaining in Winterfell, but he returned nonetheless at his father's summons. He found King's Landing buzzing with rumors of Ned Stark's stubborn silence and Robb Stark's march. Over mulled Hippocras, Tyrion shared a jest with Jaime. "A thousand wolves nip at the lion's tail. Pity the tail is currently attached to a rutting cub brandishing a crown." Jaime's grin tightened. He felt the tremor of doom rumbling like distant hooves. One misstep, and the Lannister dynasty might fall faster than Bran from that tower. Yet he would not speak of that day, would not admit the boy's death weighed heavier upon his conscience each time he saw Ned's stoic face behind iron bars. The King's Road south of Moat Cailin became a river of iron. Robb's host, 15,000 strong, flowed between stands of birch where leaves trembled in the warm breath of late spring. Nights by the watchfires yielded camaraderie and the low drum of distant owls. In the glare of day, ravens circling above, Robb rode ahead with gray wind scouting swift through underbrush. Scouts returned daily bearing tidings of Lannister levies assembling at the Golden Tooth. Robb studied each parchment by firelight, the crackle echoing his racing pulse. Theon Greyjoy rode at his right hand, hawkbright, boasting of Pike's brutal tides and taunting Karstark men with ribald jokes. Yet when dark crept near, Theon's laughter fell brittle. He watched Robb bent over maps, jaw clenched like stone, and wondered whether he would ever command such loyalty. Long nights he fingered the kraken clasp and dreamed of gray seas and black sails. At Maidenpool, a boy called Olivar Fry arrived, cheeks pink beneath wisps of beard. He carried pale twins of parchment. One extended Walder Frey's courteous welcome should Robb pass the twins, the other enumerated precise terms. Acknowledgement of Fry precedence in all crossing matters, betrothal of Lord Eddard's daughter Arya to young Elmar Fry and Sansa to whichever Fry heir Walder deemed fit, along with the squire's post for one of Walder's innumerable grandsons. Reading, Robb's brows knit. Catelyn's letters had warned of Lord Walder's calculating pride. Still, the taste of bargaining away his sister's curdled bile in his throat. He placed the parchment into the saddlebag. "We cross by the twins or by boat?" Theon asked. Robb stared at the silver thread of the trident on his map. "We shall see." North of the wall, Jon Snow knelt before Lord Commander Jeor Mormont in the solar of the King Tower. A raven caught upon the windowsill, corn, corn, as though mocking human deliberation. Mormont offered the boy a sealed letter bearing the Stark dire wolf. "Your brother marches." Jon's gut twisted. Reading Robb's crisp lines, he felt distance widen like a crevasse beneath his boots. Robb's words spoke of honor and need, of father's life in jeopardy. Each sentence bled duty. The parchment ended with a plea, "Remember who you are." Jon stood silent. Mormont's eyes, bright as chipped ice, weighed him. "You have vows to consider, lad." Jon's fingers tightened until the parchment crumpled. "And blood. Both command loyalty." Night swallowed his answer. He climbed the wall alone, ghost padding behind. Up there, world bent into nothing but wind and black horizon. A swirling snowfall began, each flake a mute petition. "Father needs me," Jon murmured. Ghost pressed cold nose to his hand, red eyes reflecting stars. Yet the wall itself seemed to speak in grinding ice. "You are sworn." Far below in the forest, torches flickered, ranging parties returned. One day soon, Jeor Mormont would ride north searching for Benjen Stark, missing since first thaw. Jon's vow to join that ranging would keep him chained to his post. Conflict gnawed his heart, the split of a boy who wished he could die twice, once for each family. At Dragonstone, Stannis Baratheon stood before the fiery heart of the chamber of the painted table as Melisandre of Ass High traced long red nails across old pine. The flames in the great hearth leapt higher at her incantations. Stannis's jaw, all granite, eased not at her words. "A shadow moves in the capital. The usurper's line is false, your claim righteous. Yet before the true king can rise, the false hand must fall, for his blood fuels the song of ice and fire." Stannis frowned. "Ned Stark? The realm needs men like him, not red tongues wagging about demons." Melisandre's ruby choker pulsed a slow heartbeat. "A different blood. Yours, Lord?" "Sacrifice shapes fate." Stannis turned away. He had no fondness for blood songs, but he heard the warhorn call echoing from each raven perched upon battlements. Soon decision would come. Miles inland from the Bay of Crabs, a hamlet called Shervine was reduced to cinders. Its smoke a pillar against the noon sky. Gregor Clegane's riders thundered westward in search of wolves. Villagers fled to woodlands, whispering of black lions skulking with torches. Rumor tangled, fear fattened. In King's Landing, Cersei read each report and smiled thinly. Sowing confusion was sometimes better than sowing banners. Back in Winterfell, Rickon's tantrums grew wilder. Shaggy dogs snapped at grooms, chased geese flapping. Maester Luwin suggested sending the child south to White Harbor, where Lady Manderly might provide calmer environs. Catelyn refused. "We Starks endure together." Yet the castle felt emptier each dawn. Ravens bore grim tidings from the south. River lords mustering, Tywin Lannister moving into the west. Every parchment brought new knots to her temples. On a rain-slick afternoon, Catelyn walked Bran's favored rampart, lifting her face to the downpour. She imagined each raindrop a whispered memory. Bran's whoop as he climbed, his stubborn grin when challenged, the weight of his hand in hers. Kneeling, she pressed her brow against cool stone. "Watch over them all," she begged the dead child. And for a heartbeat, she felt the rampart thrum beneath her, as though the castle itself answered. The trident gleamed steel-gray under moonsilver when Robb Stark laid camp upon its northern bank. Twin towers loomed upriver, their stone flanks red in torchlight. Catelyn had galloped south to meet him, cloak flapping like a torn banner. They stood in his pavilion, faces inches apart, words hushed. "Walder Frey can be bought only with promises kept," she warned. Robb paced. "I will not barter Sansa and Arya." Catelyn's eyes flashed. "They are pawns on this board whether we like it or not. Assert your queenship now or kneel to Joffrey." When Robb flinched at queenship, she softened. "We need the crossing, Robb. Without it your host crawls 100 leagues to find fords, giving Tywin time to crush us in detail." He raked fingers through auburn hair. "Then I must choose which daughter to trade like coin." Catelyn drew him close. Better a pledged daughter than a beheaded father. So the next dawn they rode to the twins, the river mist cold as a shroud. Inside the drafty hall, Walder Frey, stooped and sallow, examined the newcomers with watery malice. His children lined benches like mismatched gargoyles. Walder chewed on the offer, hacking phlegm into a cup. "A son of mine shall have your sister," he croaked. "Another will squire for your mighty self. And when the day comes, a daughter of mine should bear your own heir." Catelyn stiffened, Robb's knuckles blanched, but he agreed. Frey's smile split like wet parchment. Terms struck, the army crossed the bridge as storms seeded thunderheads overhead. On the far bank, ravens rose in black clouds. Scouts reported a Lannister outrider slain upstream. Grey Wind's jaws had found him. War was no longer rumor, it snarled at their heels. King's Landing baked under a scalding sun as an ironclad galley docked at the Mudgate. Out marched Sellswords in serried ranks, banners of the Golden Company hidden beneath tarps until coin changed hands. Varys watched from a parapet, face unreadable. When the eunuch retired to his chambers, he opened a secret drawer. Within lay a letter penned in a crabbed hand. If Bran had lived, he might have been the bridge. In his absence, the long night creeps. The real war is not for thrones. Varys burned the parchment. Ash curled like black petals before drifting into the sea breeze. At the Whispering Wood, Robb Stark sprung his trap. Night enveloped riverbanks thick with elm and willow while Lannister sentries dozed. Grey Wind's silent dash through darkened undergrowth heralded chaos. Out of the gloom, northern swords rose like starlight, fell with slaughterous grace. Ser Jaime Lannister carved a red path, every swing gilded by campfires. Yet ranks collapsed, horses reared, horns wailed. War-driven tactics made ghosts of the Starks, or so survivors swore. At dawn, Jaime knelt before Robb, wrists bound, golden hair matted with blood. Robb's gaze was steel. "If my father dies, so do you?" Jaime flashed a wolfish grin. "My regards to your little sisters." Robb struck him across the jaw. Silence followed, broken only by the hush of the woods. Bran's woods no longer, but still haunted by the boy who had once loved secrets and climbing. Word of the victory shivered down rivers and roads like frost. In King's Landing, Cersei's nails left bloody crescents in her palms. Tyrion quaffed dark arbor red in stunned silence. The realm felt the scales tip, but Tywin Lannister was already moving. At Harrenhal's blackened battlements, he convened bannermen, firelight casting grotesque shadows upon melted towers. "The wolf pup thinks his fangs sharp," Tywin growled. "We will snap them." He split his forces, half north to confront Robb, half south to smash the Riverlords. Reports spoke of Lord Tywin's host numbering 30,000. War songs rose beneath the ruined vaults of Harrenhal, echoing like the laughter of burned ghosts. On an island of basalt in the narrow sea, Piet bowed before Daenerys Targaryen. The mother of dragons held Drogon upon a gloved wrist, his wingspan wider each week. Her ships prepared for Qarth, visions filled her nights, bone-white winter stretching across a continent, a wolf banner torn by lions, a boy with ice in his veins crumbling into dust. She did not know the boy, but when she woke she felt an absence in the world, as though the tapestry of fate had lost a luminous thread. She vowed to weave new fire in its stead. Jon Snow's choice came with blood. A ranging party found 2 dead brothers, throats blackened by frozen blood, blue eyes wide. When their corpses rose at night inside Castle Black's cold storage, Jon burned them. Flames clawed at darkness, scent of charred flesh coiling skyward like accusation. Next dawn, Jeor Mormont summoned the watch. "We ride north at first melt," he declared. "If dead men walk, we bring war to them." Jon's heart thrummed. His place was here, not south with Robb Bran's death or no. Duty hardened into armor. That night he dreamt of Bran again. But now the boy stood amidst weirwood roots, eyes not blue or gentle brown, but dark voids speckled with red flecks. When Jon reached for him, Bran dissolved like snow in hot hands. He woke sweating. Ghosts stared, ears flattened. In Riverrun Solar, Catelyn and a captive Jaime spoke like duelists fencing with memory. She demanded the truth of Bran's fall. He dodged each thrust with sly indifference. At last Jaime's mask slipped. "I shoved him," he said, voice low, "because he saw something that would have torn the realm asunder. Better one broken boy than a kingdom at war." Catelyn's world lurched, Bran's still face flashed before her. She gripped the back of a chair until it splintered under her nails. Jaime shrugged. "Yet war came regardless, and the boy died. Tell me, my lady, was the realm spared, or did the gods merely amuse themselves with tragedy?" Catelyn left him chained, though her resolve wavered. That night she wept where no one could hear, grief alloyed with rage potent enough to weld steel. In King's Landing, Ned Stark faced the headsman's block on the steps of the great. September sunlight glared off the sword ice taken by Joffrey as a prop for spectacle. Crowd murmur thickened like storm tide, and Sansa stood beside the queen, eyes hollow, fingers white upon the balustrade. Varys whispered among the ranks of goldcloaks. Tyrion cursed softly. Cersei signaled Ser Island Pain to stay his blow until Ned would bend. But Joffrey leapt forward, squealing for blood. "Bring me his traitor's head." As Ser Island lifted ice, a howl shattered the air. An echo from the north, a memory of direwolves. Some swore they saw snow swirl, though the day was balmy. Ned Stark knelt upright, eyes far away as though he glimpsed the sun waiting at brigade ends. Then steel shone, fell, and the hush became a roar of horror. Blood soaked the marble. Sansa screamed. The realm flew apart like a clay pot under hammer blow. Even the stones of the capital seemed to tremble. By dusk Sansa Stark sat imprisoned in her chamber, moonlight silvering tear tracks on her cheeks. In an alcove Arya, who had reached the city by beggar's route, clutched needle and listened to the bell's toll, understanding too late. She slipped into hidden passages, resolved to flee before Lannister knives traced her sister's fate onto her own flesh. Varys ushered her through the dungeons, disguised as a boy. "The realm needs living wolves," he murmured. Arya swallowed grief like poison. She vowed never to sing again until vengeance's dish cooled. In the harbor she boarded a salt-rimed fishing smack bound for White Harbor. As shore lights dwindled, she imagined Bran's lost laughter in the slap of waves. She sheathed needle, whispering, "For all of us." News of Ned's execution reached Robb beneath the elm-dark boughs of the Crossroads Inn. He read Maester Vyman's hand while hearth embers collapsed into gray ash. His shoulders sagged. Silence thickened until someone sobbed, Galbart Glover's squire, a boy no older than Bran. Robb rose, voice ragged. "We follow no king who murders a guest and lies about his birth. The north is free." Swords scraped free in salute. Great John Umber shouted until rafters shook, "The king in the north." The hall erupted. For the first time in centuries, the cry spread across forests and fens, echoed in silent passes, and soared beyond even the watchful peaks of the wall, "The king in the north." Grey wind bayed long, a note of triumph bruised with mourning. Somewhere deep beneath Winterfell, Bran's bones lay still. Yet in that moment, 1,000 fires sprung bright in northern hearts, each a candle for the boy who had loved to climb. Far away, under the ice of forgotten crypts, eldritch roots twined about skulls of ancient kings. They pulsed once, faint as a moth's wings. No greasier guided them, no boy's mind wandered their labyrinth. So the memory of men of leafy crowns waned. When the blue wind of the other house swept south, there was no watchful spirit to hinder it. Night's cold crown sharpened its icy antlers, and beyond the curtain of reality, an unblinking gaze tilted to regard the living world with mounting hunger. Autumn's first frost kissed the camp outside Riverrun when Catelyn Stark crept to Jaime's cage. Torch glare wavered over his smirk as she drew her knife. "For Bran," she whispered. Jaime's smile faded. Yet she could not bring herself to slash his throat. Not now. Instead she cut his bonds. "Go," she hissed. "Fetch my daughters. Return alive, or be hunted by every wolf from here to the Shadow Tower." Jaime rubbed wrists, something like respect flickering behind green eyes. He mounted an old gelding and vanished into the murk. Treason, some would call it. Desperation, Catelyn knew. When dawn lightened, the empty cell shouted her guilt. She waited for Robb's wrath, but war's thunder drowned personal storms. Scouts galloped in bearing word. Tywin Lannister moved east with terrorsome speed. Robb's host marched again, hearts aflame with vengeance. Catelyn rode at his flank, grief forging iron in her gaze. Jon Snow, having taken his vows in the old god's name, marched beyond the wall with the Lord Commander's great ranging. Frostfangs rose jagged against a bruised sky. Ghostly lights flickered where air cracked beneath winter's claw. Around the watchfires, men whispered of dead cities under ice, of a horn that could bring the wall down, of giant spiders and their riders. Jon's thoughts strayed to Bran. If Bran had lived, he might have dreamed these very ruins and taught his brother how to navigate them. Now Jon relied on steel and Ghost's keen nose. Deep within the haunted forest, they found Bran Stark's horse, riderless, reins caked with frost. Heart-sinking, Jon knelt, fingers brushing the saddle's frozen leather. In the hush, he almost imagined Bran calling his name, urging courage. A flutter of wings startled him, raven feathers black as midnight, eyes blue as glacier runoff. The bird shrieked, flapped away. Jon rose, resolve hardening. Whatever hunted them out here, he would meet it with burning blade or die as a Stark. As the first snows of the long winter began to drift upon the Ares high passes, Lysa Arryn huddled by the moon door with little Lord Robert clutching her gown. She received a raven from Riverlands. Wolves howled, lions roared, the river ran red. But the letter that chilled her blood came from King's Landing, its parchment stiff with dried crimson. Ned Stark dead, his head displayed upon the walls. Lysa squeezed her son until he whimpered. In her mind, she saw finger bones whitened from Bran's vault, and she shivered at prophecy spinning beyond control. Tywin Lannister's wrath fell upon the Riverlands like a red wind. Harrenhal's courtyard steamed with the gore of executed prisoners. Villages burned in his wake. Yet the Blackfish Brynden Tully harried his vanguard, disappearing into reed-choked marshes. Each skirmish slowed the lion's claw. Winter nights drew long, hoarfrost-coated spearheads. Tywin gathered maesters to chart provisions. War dragged into attrition, and attrition favored those accustomed to lean months. The North remembered. One icy dawn ravens arrived with tidings of Joffrey's ill-considered edict. All northern prisoners within the city were to be executed for treason. Tywin's jaws clenched. His grandson wielded power like a toddler with wildfire. Revenge was sweet, but uncontrolled flames devoured allies too. Tywin penned orders: keep Sansa alive, leverage her as hostage, quell Joffrey's tantrum with threats of inheritance withheld. Yet another raven told of a red woman preaching in Dragonstone, proclaiming a prince reborn in salt and smoke. Tywin cast that scroll into the brazier. He would fight one war at a time. On the deck of the Balerion, a captured Myrish galley repurposed as flagship, Balon Greyjoy observed the western horizon while Theon's letter burned in his hand, pleas for aid, for recognition of stolen birthright, for fatherly pride. Balon's lips curved. Robb's war meant the north lay exposed. Iron-born raiders could carve salt seas into its flanks. Prepare the longships, he barked. Drums answered. Somewhere, Theon dreamed of Kraken's rising. Deep under the hill of Rhaenys, Qyburn's quiet experiments wove sinew to bone, forging aberrations from dead men. Cersei visited rarely, each time leaving pale yet resolute. She believed monsters could win wars when men faltered. Above them, bells clanged for each new corpse. In Flea Bottom, plague stalked the crowded alleys. The city groaned under siege of its own making. In that chaos, Sansa Stark moved like a ghost through silken halls, her grace feigned. She embroidered dire wolves with crimson eyes, hiding daggers beneath hoops of cloth. Each stitch bound her anger tighter. The hound watched her with troubled regard, a growl behind every word. One stormy night, he pressed a dagger into her palm. Hold it tight. Your songs won't save you. She whispered thanks, though tears blurred the blade. By years' turn, the sky lay iron-clouded, the land stripped of color. The king in the north won battles, but supplies dwindled, snow-choked passes. Robb sent envoys to White Harbor, yet the Manderleys must feed their own. Victory needed allies, yet all he found were debts. He missed Bran's counsel, though Bran had been only a child. Still, children saw truths men overlooked. Sometimes Robb dreamed of Bran running beside Grey Wind, laughter trailing like mist. He would wake with tears drying on his cheeks. Catelyn saw this and worried. She urged he send for negotiation with Renly, with Stannis, even with Balon. "We cannot fight all corners at once." Robb's pride flared. "I will not bend knee to southern kings who squabble while my father's bones bleach." Yet each rider brought darker news. Tywin regrouping, Stannis and Renly on collision course, Greyjoy ships sighted off Flint's Finger. Winter would devour the unwary. On a frosted midday, a hooded figure approached the camp bearing 2 bundles. Ned Stark's bones reclaimed by silent sisters brave enough to bribe golden cloaks and a white weirwood branch carved into the shape of a wolf's head. Catelyn received them with trembling hands. "From a friend," the stranger said, then vanished into falling snow. She placed the branch upon her son's war table. "Let it remind us what we fight for," she murmured. Robb's eyes glimmered. That night, as snow muffled the campfires, Catelyn knelt beside the box of bones. In darkness she traced the curve of each fragment, remembering strong arms that once lifted children toward the sky. She laid the wolf head branch across them. "Watch over him now," she whispered to Bran, to Ned, to all the lost. Outside, snowflakes whirled like silent heralds of the long night. Far north, beyond even the haunted castles of the Watch, an icebound lay cracked. From its depths rose shapes lean and tall, crowned with frost. A horn sounded thrice in the bleak, echoing across forest and dale, though no living man blew it. The others, ancient as the stars, began their silent march south. Without the eyes of a 3-eyed raven upon them, nothing checked their advance. On the wall, Jon Snow felt a chill deeper than wind. Ghost bristled. He turned his gaze toward the wilderness, and in the far-off dark he thought he saw blue sparks winking like distant lanterns. Fear knotted his stomach, yet purpose tempered it. If Bran could not witness from beyond, Jon would stand in his stead. Years hence, quiet singers would murmur of the turning of the world upon a single small tragedy. A boy who loved to climb, who saw forbidden things, who never woke to wield memory's power. His death unspooled destinies into wild reels. Kings rose and fell, dragons flew, ice walked. Thrones broke, hearts burned, winter's bite cut deeper. And somewhere in the endless night, a weirwood's carved face wept red sap for what might have been. One more dreamer to hold the realms of men within the cradle of his sight. But the dreamer slept in earthen dark, and the song played on, fierce and discordant, daring the living to write its next verse before the silence spread. The first true blizzard of the year crept over the neck like a living white leviathan, its gusts keening among the reeds of Greywater Watch before rolling north and south in equal measure. By the time the storm reached Riverrun's encampments, the wind battered tents into contorted shapes and buried the iron cook fires beneath drifts that hissed into steam. Catelyn Stark rose many times that night to check the canvas seams of her son's pavilion, half expecting the gale to tear through and carry off maps, seals, everything they had built upon faith and banners and ancient promises. Inside, Robb sat armored and alert while the torchlight kicked restless shadows along the painted riverlands spread across his war table. Grey Wind lay at his feet, the direwolf's flank twitching each time lightning split the canvas roof. Ser Edmure Tully paced near the opening flap, muttering about flooded fords and how lordlings doubted the king in the north would press toward Harrenhal in winter's left hand. Robb answered with patient steel, "Tywin will not wait for spring. Neither can we." His blue eyes shone rimmed red from restlessness, yet something colder than exhaustion anchored him. With each dispatch of ravens, with each dripping corpse dragged from river skirmishes, Bran's ghost had sharpened Robb's will into a weapon as stark as the sword he wore. Catelyn approached her son only once the others retreated from the storm's roar. She touched his gauntlet and felt the tremble beneath all that polished steel. "You must sleep," she urged. "War does not end because storms howl." Robb's smile, thin as a raven's feather, flickered. "It ends when our father's honor is set to rest and the north stands free." He gestured to the map pins marking Lannister strength at the Golden Tooth, at Harrenhal, at Maidenpool. "Look, mother, lions fear cold. Let winter be our dagger." She did not tell him that winter cared nothing for flags, only for blood made brittle by frost. Instead she kissed his brow where sweat cooled and withdrew to her own cot, where sleep came fitful and full of broken towers. At dawn, the blizzard relented. A pink band of sky blossomed in the east as if someone had slit morning's throat. Men dug out horses half buried, wrung water from cloaks, and cursed the gods both old and new. When Robb called the war council, the Northmen entered shivering but left burning. a strike into the Westerlands to force Tywin homeward, sever lion claws from the Riverland's throat. The arrow of their intent pointed straight through the crag, Ashmark, even Lannisport if fortune smiled. "We march within 2 days," Robb declared. No one spoke of Bran then, but every man there glimpsed some lost child in the iron gleam of Robb's eyes and found resolve. Catelyn remained in Riverrun to anchor their supply lines. She spent the hours after council with quills and beeswax, forging agreements for grain from House Mallister and tallow from Seaguard. Night deepened, candles guttered, and parchment stacks grew. She paused only when a shadow fell across her desk. Brienne of Tarth stood in the doorway, rain dripping from the silver bear imprint upon her pauldron. The maiden knight bowed. "Lady Stark, Ser Jaime has not yet been sighted. Tracks show 3 mounted figures heading south before the storm. I will follow them." Catelyn rubbed at her temples. "Take whomever you need." Brienne turned, purpose in every stride, the echo of her boots sounding like distant war drums. Catelyn watched her go, heart snagged on a memory of Bran wanting to ride past Wintertown alone, declaring he was big enough. She allowed herself one moment of grief before dipping quill anew. Beyond the walls of Winterfell, silence ruled the snow-capped fields. No columns of smoke rose from chimneys. The forge fires lay cold. Maester Luwin, shoulders hunched in his furred robe, stood before the castle gate with 6 men-at-arms and a single portcullis chain between them and the sea-scaled sails that now broke the horizon. Copper-green kraken banners snapped in the wind as the first ironborn longship ground its keel upon the hard shore of the White Knife. Theon Greyjoy, dressed in wolfskins pilfered from Robb's supply wagons, stepped off the gangplank like a prince returning from exile. He had not expected Winterfell to feel smaller. He had imagined gleeful conquest, imagined the look on Robb's proud face when ravens told him his own hostage had taken the castle. Yet, seeing Luwin's old eyes widen in confusion cut something inside Theon he was not prepared to sever. Still, pride demanded the play. He raised his father's silvered warhorn, blew 3 long notes that sounded like a leviathan mourning. Salt-stained men poured onto the pier behind him, axes bright and hearts hungry for plunder. Luwin advanced a single step. "Theon, you swore fealty to House Stark." "I am Ironborn," Theon answered, the words tasting of bitter ale, "and Balon Greyjoy's son." He gestured. Arrows leapt from Ironborn bows. 2 guards fell, the rest scattered. By dusk the castle that once echoed with Bran's laughter stood under the kraken. Rickon Stark, hiding in the crypts curled beside Shaggy Dog, heard his father's stone likeness above him as though it spoke through the clatter of hooves overhead. Osha held him, whispering lullabies older than Winterfell's walls. Theon's victory feast was meager fare. Winterfell's larders were half empty, for rationing had begun weeks earlier. The great hall smelled of smoke from a hastily stoked hearth and the iron tang of recently spilled blood. As mead passed between reavers, Theon raised a clay goblet. "My father's kingdom grows," he proclaimed. Cheers answered. Yet behind smiles he glimpsed suspicion in Dagmar Cleftjaw's narrowed gaze. Theon drained the cup to drown his unease. Upstairs, in Bran's abandoned chamber, he found a carved wooden horse lying by the hearth, half-painted, the riderless mount arrested mid-gallop. He picked it up, turned it once, and set it gently back down, though the gesture did nothing to still the gnawing churn of betrayal in his gut. Far to the southeast, the stormlit straits of Shipbreaker Bay seethed beneath black clouds. Renly Baratheon's colorful host camped upon the shores like an orchard in bloom, rose-red for Tyrells, green for Baratheons of the Reach, rich purple for Florence. High at the center stood Renly's silk pavilion, where laughter drifted like fragrant smoke even past midnight. Lanterns glowed within, painting frolicsome silhouettes upon the canvas. Loras Tyrell's lithe profile, Renly's broad shoulders bending to pour wine, knights unbuckling bright pauldrons after justs of pageantry. Outside, in the chill where sea spray carried salt and omens, Stannis Baratheon waited astride Shadowmare, the mare snorting pale steam. Melisandre knelt upon the ground at his feet, scarlet skirts puddled like fresh blood. She pressed a hand to the damp sand, eyes closed, lips shaping words older than the hills. Above them, the moon blotted behind storm shreds. A curl of black smoke passed from her mouth into Stannis's parted lips, uniting them in silent communion. Moments later, a shadow peeled away from Stannis's cloak and drifted across the dunes, impossibly sleek and tall, gliding soundlessly toward Renly's camp. Inside the pavilion, the laughter cut off. Swords rasped free. A scream rang sharp. Candles guttered. When the guards burst through the flaps, they found King Renly Baratheon sprawled upon rugs stitched with lilies, his chest yawning open like rotten fruit, his youthful eyes fixed skyward as if still counting jokes left unfinished. Only Loras knelt beside him, armor unlaced, blood staining his white cloak. Dawn came upon a silent camp, the silk banners suddenly vulgar in their vibrancy. The Reachmen murmured of dark magics, of Stannis' Red Woman. Many fled, others bent the knee in terror. The War of Five Kings shed one crown before the sun had fully risen. Across the narrow sea in Karth, Daenerys Targaryen stood atop the towering walls of the city of Bone and Breeze, watching shipping lanterns bob in Jade Gate's harbor. She wore a cloak of blue samite, its hem tattered from desert winds. Below, throngs of nobles in jade masks swelled through the night market, oblivious to the small black shapes that circled overhead. Drogon, regal, Viserion wheeled against the stars, each pass lower than the last. Their scales flickered bronze, copper, gold. Kartha's warlocks had tried to steal them, but her children had come home in fire. Now she sought ships, soldiers, anything that would carry her across the seas toward the Iron Throne. Men offered silks and spices, yet balked at talk of swords. Ser Jorah Mormont lingered behind her, scratching at the edge of his cloak where desert sands still hid. The heart in his eyes was plain. Khaleesi, he said, the pureborn say winter deepens in Westeros. A land frozen is easier taken by fire. Daenerys touched the warm scales of Drogon where he perched upon the parapet. Fire alone no longer feels enough, she whispered. She had begun to dream of a boy whose face she never quite saw, who stood amid roots and beckoned her closer, only to vanish into darkness each time she stepped forward. She suspected this missing boy was a warning, though whether from her blood or the world's beating heart, she could not say. Beyond the wall, the great ranging reached the fist of the first men. Jon Snow and Sam Tarly climbed white slopes iced like old wounds while ravens ghosted overhead, silent as regrets. They arrived upon the ancient ring fort just as twilight drowned the sky in bruised violets. Lord Commander Mormont ordered fires lit around the perimeter. Black brothers dug trenches and sharpened stakes. Ghost prowled the ring's crest, ears laid low, hackles dancing. Jon knelt by the dire wolf and stared into the silent forest. He recalled stories old and told of giants in the earth, of white shadows that drank warmth. Bran had loved those tales, eyes shining as though he could glimpse them. Bran is gone, Jon reminded himself for the 1000th time. But something heavier answered, yes, and everything he might have warned us of. That night Jon dreamed of icy wolves tearing free from snowbanks, blue flames licking their jaws. He woke to a distant horn, one blast, then another, then a third that echoed across the frosted valley like the shattering of an old vow. Brothers spilled from tents, eyes wide. The air crackled with unnatural chill, breath freezing before mouths opened. Through the pitch-dark forest, shapes advanced, pale figures, blades shimmering with starlight, the others. Sam whimpered prayers, PYP fumbled a torch. Jon's heart hammered but his mind cut clean. Fire arrows, he roared. Flaming shafts arced overhead, illuminating the valley in brief strobing bursts. Ranks of whites, bone pale, studded with rime. Their eye pits burned cobalt. The first wave broke against sharpened stakes, limbs and teeth shattered but crawled onward, driven by so. Me unseen will. Brothers hewed and hacked, but the dead did not bleed, still they rose. On the slope's far side, white shadows glided forward. One stepped into torchlight, tall, slender, armor like moonlit ice. Its eyes bored into Jon as though recognizing something dormant within him. It raised a spear of glass-bright crystal and pointed toward the wall as if claiming a path already decided. Jon swung Longclaw. Valyrian steel met ice with a ring like cracked bells. The other spear snapped, a scream, shrill and inhuman, pierced the night. It fell to crystalline shards. The whites faltered, but only for a breath. Jon dragged Sam up the hill. To the fire, he shouted. They retreated into flame's embrace while shadows pressed the perimeter. Hours later, dawn bled across the dead-strewn slopes. Fires still smoldered, black brothers still stood shoulder to shoulder, but their ranks had thinned as if a scythe had passed. 1 in 3 lay sprawled, frost blooming upon their lips. Lord Commander Mormont's beard was rimed white, his voice croaked orders to drag corpses into pyres. Jon bound PYP's slashed forearm, hands trembling. In his gut he felt a truth colder than any wind. Without Bran's borrowed sight, they had seen the enemy only when death crested the hill. Next time they might not live to sound 3 horns. At King's Landing, the wildfire caches awaited within the belly of Ares the Mad's old stores, last gifts from a dead dragon to a realm too foolish to forget. Tyrion Lannister oversaw the filling of clay pots, each jar sealed with cloth and pitch. He moved through the guild hall of the alchemists like a man threading a room full of sleeping lions. Yet even wildfire could not quell the tension beneath the Iron Throne. Reports of Robb's victory at Ashmark and the Greyjoy capture of Winterfell had driven Joffrey into tantrums fierce as summer squalls. One morning Tyrion found the boy king firing crossbow bolts at live sparrows in the throne room while Sansa knelt forced to name each bird for a Stark. When one feathered shape fluttered too slowly, Joffrey's bolt pinned it to a marble colonnade. He laughed, demanded another victim. Tyrion stepped in, slapped the crown from the boy's head, and earned silent applause behind every iron mask in the room. Cersei raged, but did nothing. Open war already split her armies. She could not spare men for fratricide. That night Tyrion visited the small garden above Maegor's Holdfast where Sansa sat beneath a lemon tree imported from the arbor. Moonlight made her hair silver. He offered awkward comfort and a promise of escape once the war's tide turned. Sansa thanked him in polite murmur, but her eyes held an emptiness Tyrion recognized. The same hollow Ned Stark wore in his cell, the resolve of someone already half beyond pain. In the Westerlands, Robb's host burned trebuchets and siege engines through Ser Stafford Lannister's hastily raised levies at Oxcross. The battle opened under twilight, with grey wind leading a night assault among barley fields. Wolves and men alike tore through half-armored foes. When dawn revealed dragonflies hovering over crimson pools in wheat furrows, Robb's captains knelt in respect. Yet even victory seeped sour. Ravens carried word of Theon's betrayal. Robb read the parchment alone, knuckles white, then dismissed his sworn swords for an hour. Beneath a twisted holly he knelt, head bowed. When he rose, tears had carved lines through the grime on his cheeks. "We ride home," he announced to Great John and Roose Bolton. Strategists argued flight risk. Frey envoys muttered of broken vows. Robb silenced them with one lifted gauntlet. "Winterfell is mine. My brothers are mine. My duty is north. Lions be damned," the North called. As the army wheeled east, Catelyn begged him to reconsider. "If we turn now, Tywin will ride unopposed. Every Riverland's child will pay." Robb's fury cracked then, voice ragged. "Bran is already dead. Do I leave Rickon in Ironborn chains to spare strangers?" Catelyn's answer died on her tongue. She understood too well the pull of bloodlines, but dread curled in her gut. Every mile between them and supplies thinned their strength. Every retreating step invited Tywin's jaws. The night Robb's army reached the Blue Fork fords, steel clashed across the water's other bank. Out of the darkness galloped Ser Brynden Blackfish, cloak torn, blood splattered, wet as ink. "Tywin moves north," he gasped, "faster than a fox on wildfire. If you break for Winterfell now, he will carve the Riverlands to marrow before snowmelt." Robb's silence weighed heavier than any oath. Slowly he turned away from the road north. Each hoofbeat felt like betrayal of a younger brother howling for help. Yet to abandon their allies entirely would shred the fragile tapestry of loyalty. He sent Lord Bolton instead, commanding him to take half the host by forced march to reclaim Winterfell. Roose bowed, pale eyes unreadable. In the camp's cold fires, rumors spread of flaying knives polished anew. But desperate men greeted any hope of home with cheers. When Bolton's column departed under a hard wind, Robb watched until shadow swallowed the last banner. He whispered to Grey Wind, "Guard them, boy." The dire wolf nuzzled his palm, though his amber eyes drifted toward the tree lean as if seeing specters where none yet stood. Roose Bolton rode with grim efficiency. His pikemen kept fast pace, cutting through the ruins of burned villages where children wept among caved-in cottages. At dusk on the third day, they overtook a ragged company of Ironborn stragglers driving stolen sheep. Bolton's men fell upon them with silent glee. Dawn revealed flayed corpses hanging from weirwood branches, blood still dripping pink petals into snow. No Stark banners flew above the carnage. The crows took note. Within Winterfell's walls, Theon felt unease coil tighter. Ravens delivered news of Bolton's approach. Dagmar's reavers demanded retreat. Theon barked orders to shore up defenses, but his garrison numbered fewer than 200. Bent kneelers, milk cows of the Greenlands, some muttered behind his back. Yet he refused to flee. Pride sharpened each word, "We hold this castle." At night he dreamed of the sea lapping at broken towers, of Balan's laughter dissolving into Bran's scream. Each dawn he awoke drenched, the wooden horse still by his bedside. Osha orchestrated Rickon's flight through hidden passages Bran once loved. Shaggy Dog padded ahead, they vanished into Wolfswood's snarl. 2 farm boys killed and charred past as the Stark princes, Theon's ruse. When Bolton's flayed banners appeared on the horizon, he thought fortune smiled. But then came another standard, a yellow smiling face, blazon of House Ryswell. The Boltons had allied with Freys en route. And with Freys came whispered deals. On the second night of siege, a horn sounded within Winterfell, soldiers of both banners already occupying its keep through Theon's own turncloaks. Dagmar walked into audience hall bearing Theon's broken war horn. "Your men chose gold," he grinned. Theon took a step back. Winterfell burned not long after, plumes blackening the sky. Within the god with the heart tree's face blistered in heat, crimson sap steaming like tears. Theon's fate disappeared into smoke. North of these horrors, Rickon and Osha slipped through lonely holds, ever pursued by dogs and darker things. At night the boy cried for Bran, cried for a father he barely remembered, cried for safe halls and warm bread. Osha held him close beneath a hollow elm, whispering of giant kin that once strode these woods, of strength found in the bones of the earth. She did not speak of who might yet guide them now. In the far south the Blackwater rush glittered beneath a sickle moon. Stannis' fleet filled the bay, 500 ships black as midnight, sails snapping with air that smelled of pine, pitch, and destiny. Davos Seaworth stood on the deck of Black Betha, counting torches along the walls of King's Landing, trying to guess how many men could be persuaded to open postern gates when gold failed and fear ruled. Above them the Red Keep's towers stabbed the sky like sinister thorns. Inside the city, Tyrion Lannister oversaw the chaining of the harbor mouth, while Haleen the pyromancer and his sunken-cheeked acolytes rolled the last 3,000 wildfire casks down muddy lanes toward the shore. Each jar wept a neon sheen where resin cracked. As dawn loosened night's hold, Stannis' drums pounded. Sails blossomed. Bells rang in alarm. Archers lined the battlements. When the first green explosion blossomed beneath Faring's galleon, the sky turned emerald. Inferno raced across waves, lacquered hulls, flesh. Wildfire screamed like a living thing, vaporizing seawater. Yet Stannis pressed on. Blackened hulks became stepping stones, soldiers dashed from burning deck to ruined quay. Scaling ladders slapped against the walls. Tyrion led sorties through the mud gate, hacking, screaming, helm dented. Joffrey fled the battlements at Cersei's summons. Sansa prayed with the other women in Maegor's, yet her lips barely moved. She watched Sandor Clegane pace like a cornered bear, wildfire reflection dancing in his haunted eyes. When he abandoned post to flee north, he offered to take her. She refused, fear-freezing choices. The walls thundered under granite fists, but just as Tyrion's strength waned, the roar of hooves filled the night. Tywin Lannister and Mace Tyrell burst through the King's Road gate, golden roses and red lions mingling. Stannis' men broke, ran, or died beneath mounted lances. In the courier halls of Riverrun, ravens arrived bearing charcoal impressions of a stag's crowned head split by fire, witness to Stannis' defeat. Catelyn crumpled one message, wondering if a world without Bran had become a wheel rolling ever bloodier, unstoppable. She sought the solace of the Godwood pool, but its reflection offered no peace. Crimson leaves floated like scabbed petals, and the face carved in the heart tree looked less like a god than a cut awaiting further blow. She whispered to wind, "Grant me guidance," but received only the distant rumble of thunder, as though the sky prepared its own judgments. At the fist of the first men, the survivors limped east toward the wall under slate skies void of mercy. Jon Snow carried a wounded Gren across his shoulders. Sam hobbled behind, cheeks hollow, muttering half-remembered citadel passages about legends becoming prophecy. They reached Craster's keep just as the last torch winked out, only to find Craster's daughters whispering of pale riders glimpsed in the trees. That night a newborn's cry echoed through log walls. Soon after, silence fell. Ghost stood beneath the gnarled tree, muzzle wrinkling, as if sensing unnatural offerings left in snow. Jon followed, unbidden. He saw Craster set the wailing infant down on a stump beyond the palisade. Cold seeped into Jon's marrow. From the dark, a figure emerged, taller than any man, eyes lambent. It lifted the child, and frost blossomed beneath its feet like glass seeding. Jon gasped, the others had snapped toward him. For one endless heartbeat their gazes locked, and in that stare Jon felt echoing caverns fill his mind with ice, saw armies tireless and ancient. Then the creature vanished into darkness with its prize. Jon stumbled back, shaking. He understood something vital had just unfolded he could not undo. Without Bran's gift to warn of such rites, the Watch stood blind. He resolved then to infiltrate the wildling host and learn their secrets, a plan half-formed in fear's furnace. Back south, Balon Greyjoy crowed upon Pike's Saltcliffe Tower, toasting news that Bolton's flayed men had left Winterfell in ashes. The north splintered. Yet storms do not heed boasts. On the same day his raven arrived, a tempest slammed the Iron Islands, sinking 50 longships and flooding Naga's Ribs promenade. Sailors whispered of angry gods displeased with Balon's hubris. In his chambers, Balon paced, ignoring the warnings as if they were seagull screeches. Across the courtyard, Asha Greyjoy sharpened axes, eyes slitting each time her father dismissed talk of mainland counterstrikes. She knew Northmen survived storms longer than any kraken. On a damp morning near the Twins, Roose Bolton returned to Robb's war host under banners smeared with soot. He reported Winterfell lost, boys presumed dead. Something in Robb cracked then. Catelyn saw it, a fissure that opened and swallowed the boy she knew. He walked into his pavilion alone. Grey wind bayed and would not be calmed. By dusk Robb emerged with eyes rimmed iron. "We press south," he told his captains. "If I cannot save my brothers, I will carve vengeance from Lannister hide until none remain." He announced his intention to wed no Frey daughters, for their vows were built upon bones. Instead he decreed his heart already promised to Lady Jane Westerling, whose gentle tending of his wounds after Oxcross had soothed him. Catelyn's breath caught, another bond broken. She foresaw wrath from the twins sharper than any sword. Jaime Lannister, meanwhile, rode with Brienne across the Riverlands, bickering like mismatched wolves. Each dawn they traded barbs. Each dusk they traded grudging respect. When they reached the Sapphire Isle's misted shores, Frey outriders ambushed them, iron nets dropping from trees. Brienne fought like a demon, but numbers told. They bound both and marched them to the Twins, where Lord Walder awaited with lips thin as paring knives. He greeted Jaime with mocking bows, but his true anger veered toward the son of Winterfell who broke betrothal promises. "A wedding shall be had," he rasped, spittle gleaming, "whether the groom fancies it or not." Jaime's sardonic smile hid a glimmer of pity for his absent rival. He knew Walder Frey's grudges were rivers that inevitably drowned someone downstream. Daenerys reached Astapor clad in indigo silk, hair braided with dragonbone clasps. The slavers lined the plaza of punishment, sneers shadowed by brick walls sun-kissed red. She traded a dragon for 8,000 unsullied, then reclaimed the beast with fire and blood. As the chain cracked from Drogon's neck, the city's whips wilted, bricks split, screams spiraled skyward. Grey Worm knelt before her amid swirling ash. She spoke Valyrian of home and freedom, and thousands answered with spear butts drumming. That night, roaring flames devoured the Great Pyramid, and Daenerys spoke to her captains of new gods walking cold lands far off, of a north that needed her fire. Yora watched her face lit by dragon flame and feared not for her, but for every kingdom that would oppose her. In King's Landing, Tywin Lannister sat the Iron Throne more often than Joffrey. Peter Baelish received lordship of Harrenhal. Varys spun webs. Olenna Tyrell arrived with a tongue-honed sharper than any blade, soon intertwining Sansa in schemes of roses and thorns. The girl smiled politely, but behind blue eyes she counted corridors, guards' routes, times of changing watch, storing all like seeds awaiting spring. One dawn she visited the Godwood. Beneath the pale heart tree, scarred and transplanted from Wolfswood long ago, she prayed not to old gods or new, but to Bran. "Wherever you are," she whispered, "guide me." The leaves rustled though there was no wind. No spirit stirred to answer in truth. Bran's bones lay still, yet perhaps something of him lingered, a residue of the dreamer that might carry on currents beyond mortal sense. The leaves shifted again, and Sansa glimpsed dawn's first light haloing the Red Keep's tower like hope's precarious crown. Robb camped on the outskirts of the crag when ravens from the Twins found him. The parchment smelled of damp and anger. Lord Walder demanded apology, restitution, and the king's presence to honor previous contracts. Robb's jaw clenched. He forged a reply promising safe conduct to discuss alliances. Lord Karstark counseled caution. Catelyn pressed for humility. But the die was cast. Plans moved swiftly. The king in the north rode for the Twins with music in his retinue and doubt in his heart. The King's Road echoed beneath autumn leaves as banners streamed red and gray toward barbed silhouettes of the Twins' towers. Inside, Walder Frey prepared feast halls with trencher platters, fountains of hippocras, barrels of Dornish red, all lacquered with false warmth. Flutists rehearsed, crossbowmen oiled winches overhead. In the sept, priests rehearsed vows between Edmure Tully and Rosalind Fry, who wept quietly into linens scented of fear. Thunder drummed distant as guests crossed the bridge. Robb greeted Walder, forced smile fixed. Catelyn studied every glance, every servant with gloved hand where a crossbow string might hide. Yet suspicion and hospitality danced uneasy. Fear simmered beneath ale's froth. At dusk the betting began. Musicians played the Maiden Fair. The doors slammed closed. Bolts hammered into place. The first quarrel pierced gray wind's flank outside in the courtyard. His howl cut short by a dozen more. Inside, the music turned shrill, drums quickening into heartbeat imitation. Robb turned, brow knitting. A lute string snapped, not a string, a crossbow bolt punching through. Chaos erupted. Catelyn shoved Rosalind beneath a table. Tully men scrambled, but blades sprouted among benches. Bolton rose amid the carnage, cloak shedding pink and red squares. The Lannisters send their regards. His dagger slipped into Robb's heart once, twice, eyes inches apart. Blood blossomed across kingly doublet. Catelyn screamed, seized Walder's wife, pressed knife to throat. Her hand shook. Let him go, she begged. Walder sipped wine. Bolton withdrew the blade, Robb sagged. Catelyn's knife blurred, but too slow, guards skewered her. She slashed the hostage's throat as final act. Her own blood joined her son's upon the rush-strewn floor. Outside, rain began to fall, soft at first, then in sheets like grief unending. News flew on raven wings, black petals falling upon every hearth. At Castle Black, Jon Snow received the tidings from a white bird whose feathers rhymed with frost. Robb dead, Catelyn dead, the North leaderless. Jon stared at the parchment until ink bled into blur. He felt as though a final lamp had gone out. Sam touched his shoulder. Jon shrugged free, walked into the night until Ghost found him standing upon an ice-scoured ridge staring north. He whispered Bran's name, though he wasn't sure why. The wind hauled the syllables away like smoke. East of the Painted Mountains, Arya huddled beside the Hound near a dying fire. She too had felt some unseen cord snap. In her dream she saw Robb's crown roll through snow until it reached Bran's stone slab, where it cracked open like an egg, spilling shadow. She woke with tears frozen on lashes and did not speak of it, only stared into embers until dawn. At Dragonstone, Melisandre burned leeches in Stannis' name again. Joffrey, Balon, Robb, and one by one ravens bore confirmation of deaths. Stannis' resolve hardened. He ordered Davos to prepare ships for the Wall, for whispers of white shadows turned his thoughts north. Davos argued for the small folks suffering in the Riverlands. Melisandre countered with prophecy. Stannis chose destiny over duty. The black sails of his ragtag fleet unfurled under a dying moon, heading for Eastwatch by the sea. In the smoking ruins of Winterfell, sprigs of green pushed through cracked flagstones as spring's ghost mocked the desolation. A man cloaked in ragged black surveyed the wreckage. Bran's friend, the blacksmith apprentice, whose name once lost to war, now strung with rumor. He found the charred wooden horse in rubble, added it to a sack of shattered hopes. Then he limped beyond the walls, south towards something he could not yet name. Deep within the Frostfangs, Mance Raydo assembled clans under banners of mammoth hide and snow bear fur. Giants thundered drums, spearwives sharpened obsidian. Word reached them of wights prowling ever south, of others creeping behind like living blizzards. Mance declared the time come to break the Wall's gate before the dead drowned them all. Tormund Giant's Bane roared agreement, though he glanced often at the pale skies as if seeking absent stars. And in that sky above the Wall one eve, a red comet burned anew, flaring as though reborn. Men in black robes whispered of omens, of God's eyes reopening. Jon watched it from atop the King Tower, the glow reflecting in Ghost's crimson gaze. The chill in his bones felt not of weather but of fate. He remembered Bran once telling old Nan he dreamed of flying beyond the sky. Jon lifted his face to the comet's light and swore, "For you, little brother, I will stand." The world below spun on, battered and bloodied, each turn dragging it deeper into a night no living soul yet understood. Without the three-eyed raven to thread visions through weirwood roots, memory frayed, futures tangled, and the secret war between ice and fire marched inexorably toward dawn or toward an endless, silent darkness. Only shards of lost prophecy clung in scattered hearts, a king that was promised, a wolf's blood running to the sea, a dragon queen crossing ash-hallowed waters. They would converge or collapse. And beneath it all, the dreamer remained in cold stone silence, never to wake, while the song of the living battered on against a brewing storm older than the wall itself. The corpses of Robb Stark and Catelyn Tully lay beneath black silk in the chill cellars of the twins for 3 days before Walder Frey permitted the Silent Sisters to remove them. Even in death, the mother's fingers still clutched at her son's torn doublet, a grip so fierce the septas needed knives to pry them apart. By torch glow, the sisters bathed the bodies, sewed the gaping wounds shut, and bound gray stones over the eyes. From the yard above came snatches of laughter, the clang of tankards, a fiddler sawing out a jig for men drunk on wolf blood victory. When the Silent Sisters bore the corpses out through the east gate at dawn, the river mist coiled around the mules' hooves like morning veils. They headed north, 2 grim wagons escorted by a dozen spearmen in Frey livery. No prayers were spoken. The wind alone sang, rattling the reeds that lined the green banks of the Trident. Somewhere far ahead, a dire wolf howled as if awakened late to grief. News of the Red Wedding crossed the realm in widening rings of outrage. At White Harbor, Lord Wyman Manderley received the Raven while presiding over the launch of a new fat-bellied carrack. The parchment trembled in his hand. The dockside cheers died beneath the keel's first splash. He dismissed the yard and locked himself in his counting house until dusk, Quill scratching out letters to every surviving northern lord. Bolton treachery, Frey abomination, blood for blood. When the candles burned to puddles, he sealed each scroll with the leaping merman, though a wolf's head had been freshly carved upon the signet face. Lady Meage Mormont flung her cup of goat's milk at the hearth when her raven came. On Bear Island milk was seldom wasted, but so were Stark's. By nightfall skiffs left every cove, oars biting black water toward the mainland, each hull filled with grim women in boiled leather mail. They bore axes etched with runes of the first men and war cries older than Undul's. The mountain clans heard by way of a peddler half-frozen upon the high passes. The burly and Norey men stripped him of ale and news alike. Before the sun set, they were lifting bronze war horns to their lips. In the echoing valleys the sound rolled like avalanche thunder, waking crimson rooks from the pines. At Harrenhal, Roose Bolton dined upon spiced swan the evening the messenger arrived from Lord Walder. "It is done," the boy recited, eyes down, voice thin as string. Bolton set down his knife, wiped his lips with a square of black silk, and glanced across the long table to Qyburn, who stood robed in gray, face unreadable. The Lord's smile was slight, almost gentle. "Send flayed men to collect the boy's crown," Roose said. "The Riverlands will howl," Qyburn observed. "Let them. Wolves howl too, yet they bleed." Above them the melted towers of Aegon's Folly shivered as night wind moaned between slag-glass ribs. Somewhere below, the ghosts of Heron's children whispered, but Roose heard only the crackle of freshlit fires and the faint chime of whetstones on steel. Sansa Stark stood upon a balcony of Maegor's Holdfast the next twilight, hands folded against the chill that drifted over Blackwater Bay. She watched gulls wheel and listened to the faint clang of chains as fishermen hauled tangled nets from shallows still fouled by wildfire residue. A single gull landed on the parapet, cocked its head, and released 3 short cries. Sansa remembered Bran teaching Rickon the language of crows, 3 caws for strangers, 2 for wolves, 1 for snow. She turned away before tears could freeze on lashes. The court would hold a feast that night to celebrate a victory over Stannis Baratheon, and the Queen had decreed the Stark girl must attend in cloth of silver to prove the North's loyalty remained intact. Sansa wondered if the Queen could stitch a smile upon her face as easily as seamstresses stitched pearls on velvet. In the gardens below, Ser Dantos Hollard lurked in the shadow of a lemon tree reeking of sour wine. He met her eyes only long enough to nod toward the Tower of the Hand where Peter Baelish had taken new rooms. Sansa shivered. She was a lone rook on a board crowded with queens and knights carved of hardened ice. Yet somewhere beyond those walls her sister prowled free, somewhere far to the north, Jon still lived. Or so she prayed. Arya Stark and Sandor Clegane followed half-frozen streams across the southern edge of the neck, for the King's Road crawled with Frey patrols dragging prisoners in lines like hooked trout. They stole food, stole horses, stole blankets when nights bit deepest. The Hound spoke little, but when he did it was a vengeance paid in steel. Arya spoke less. At night she mouthed her list beside the dying coals: Cersei, Joffrey, Island Payne, Meryn Trant, Walder Frey, Roose Bolton. She added names now: Ryman Fry, Blackwalder Fry, Lothar Fry, all the phrase. The words tasted of copper on her tongue. One morning she realized she no longer recalled the sound of Bran's laughter, only the crack of the crossbow string that killed him in her last dream. She pressed her face to Nymeria's thick pelt and whispered an apology into fur she would likely never stroke again. In the crypts beneath Winterfell, embers still smoldered where the heart tree's charred roots met blackened earth. Ramsay Snow walked among toppled stone kings, torch held high. The flicker painted broken faces in grotesque motion: King Roderick, King John, Queen Lyanna, all cracked by fire and weight. Ramsay's grin bared teeth too white. He paused at the niche that once held Lord Rickard Stark. Empty. The bones had been stolen in the sack's chaos. He drove his torch into a mound of ash and spit upon it. Old ghosts, he sniffed, then turned to the kennelmen who followed. Plenty of room for new statues. His laugh chased them up the damp stairs. Outside the compound, battered weirwood stumps stood as black silhouettes against a slate sky. Ramsay ordered them pulled and burned. By night the air reeked of sap and sacrilege. Castle Black lay bruised beneath the storm. Jon Snow stood upon the outer steps of the King Tower with Ser Dolorous Ed beside him, watching Stannis Baratheon's ragged banners appear through swirling flakes. The king's ships had landed at Eastwatch, then pushed along the wall road in a column of iron and frost. Now they arrived at the gate of men whose loyalty was still sworn to no crowns, only black cloth and ancient stones. Stannis rode at the head, jaw set like carved granite. Melisandre paced beside him, robes whispering across crusted snow, ruby pulsing as though each heartbeat drew fire from winter. Jon descended the steps, cloak whipping. "This is the Night's Watch," he called above the wind. "We keep our own gate?" Stannis reined up. "And we'll keep it still, Lord Snow, once I have driven the wildling host back into the grave they clawed from." He dismounted, boots crunching ice. "But first I must see the men who stood at the fist and kept death at bay." Jon met the king's flinty gaze. Behind him, the Watch brothers gathered like burnt crows, wary, wounded. Ghost padded forward, sniffed Stannis' mailed hand, then bared teeth in silent warning. Stannis raised a brow but did not flinch. "A direwolf here at the end of the world," he murmured. "I take that as a sign." Melisandre's eyes gleamed candle bright. "The wolf coughs flame in dreams of snow," she whispered. Jon felt the hair on his neck stiffen. In the frostbitten wilds east of Last Hearth, Bran's friend Mira Reed knelt over a pond frozen into a flawless mirror. Her brother Jojen lay on a litter behind her, skin wax pale, breaths shallow clouds. His green sight had torn at him for moons, visions of ravens burning, of trees bleeding fire, of white mist devouring voices. When the sky cleared one dawn, Jojen seized her wrist with sudden strength. "The path is dead," he rasped. "The one who would be tree is stone. We are lost." He slipped into fever then. Mira carried him on, steering by moss and memory, knowing only that south meant war, north meant dead men, and nowhere meant sanctuary. Asha Greyjoy's longship, Seabitch, beached on a barren spit in the Bight. She strode through knee-deep snow toward Lady Barbary Dustin's encampment. The Barrowton banner men ringed cook fires with dull eyes, red knuckles clasped around spear hefts. They greeted Asha in brittle tones. Ironborn were no friends to Dustin, yet Bolton had declared her an honored guest. In a sodden tent she met with Harold Karstark, Gale Glover, and Lord Wylis Manderly's envoy, a squat woman named Willa. They spoke in hushed voices of forging a spear of the north, of turning on Bolton once the Freys exhausted themselves at Moat Cailin. Asha listened, thumb stroking her knife hilt. She knew treachery when she smelled it. This plan stank worse than bilge. Still, it was war, and war birthed strange bedfellows. She offered ships to ferry Dustin's riders down the Saltspear in exchange for Manderly grain to feed Ironborn crews. They shook on it, though each measured the other for a dagger's width. Far south in Meereen, Daenerys Targaryen tasted dust for breakfast. The siege engines of Yunkai rattled outside the walls, hurling barrels stuffed with pale corpses over the bricks. Each impact spread clouds of choking ash and disease spores. Her unsullied burned the bodies in pyres taller than pyramids. In her throne room, Shea Pate and Grey Worm argued for a sortie. Dario Naharis lounged against a column, daggers flashing between fingers. Ser Barristan Selmy stood stoic beside the queen, white cloak stained with soot. Daenerys rubbed Drogon's scales. "If I fly against their lines, they will break," she said. "Perhaps," Barristan answered, "or they may strike the city in your absence." His gaze drifted toward a carved balcony where children of Meereen peered with hollow eyes. "Fire wins battles. Hearts win kingdoms." Daenerys rose. "Then I will give them both." She strode to the balcony. Before 10,000 hunger-thinned faces she raised her voice. I am Daenerys Stormborn, mother of dragons, breaker of chains. I have seen winter falling on the land that robbed me. I will return there with peace, or I will return there with fire. Which shall it be? The roar of the crowd rolled back like tide hitting sea wall. Some cried peace, some cried fire. Drogon tilted his head, red eyes glowing. The choice, she saw, would not be hers alone. In King's Landing, Queen Regent Cersei Lannister discovered a white raven perched upon her windowsill one gray dawn. It bore no message. When she reached for it, the bird leapt to her shoulder, settled, and croaked out a single word in a voice ragged, half-human, widow. Then it beat its wings and vanished into the murk. That afternoon, Maester Pycelle shuffled before the Iron Throne with news from Old Town. The conclave had declared a great winter begun, signs of it read in star positions and comet tails. Cersei dismissed the old man with a flick of her hand. Yet the word gnawed, widow. At dusk she visited Joffrey's chambers, where her son paced, ranting about the Tyrell's insolence. She watched him flourish a crossbow, fire a bolt into a target shaped like a direwolf's head. The shaft quivered. Widow. She remembered Robert's corpse, wine-bloated, lying cold in a bed he had never invited her to share. Widow. She wondered if winter storms might finally freeze the lion's blood in her veins. On the King's Road north of the Trident, the silent sisters guiding the Stark dead were intercepted by 20 horsemen in black and gold. At their head rode Brynden Tully, the Blackfish, sword drawn. The Frey escort scattered like chaff, the sisters bowed. Under moon and torch, Brynden removed the hoods from the bodies. Robb's face still bore the gray pall of death. Catelyn's hair had turned white as hoarfrost in her final terror. The Blackfish knelt until knees croaked. Then he stood. We ride for Riverrun, he told the sisters. Let stone walls guard what vows could not. They buried Robb beside the tumbling red river under cover of dark. Brynden cut a young willow sapling and planted it above the grave. May your crown grow roots, he whispered. Catelyn's body he kept beneath a cloak. In dreams that night a soft voice called him from the torrent's edge, asking for knives. He woke sweating, but when he checked the cloak, the corpse's throat was whole. Even so, he tasted copper on his tongue. East of the shivering sea, a weathered cog named the Shy Maid sailed from Volantis, bearing a motley crew, a sellsword mocked as a duck, a red-haired washerwoman with eyes like rusted iron, 2 men claiming to be merchants but speaking with Westerosi cadence, and a sullen boy with mismatched eyes who never removed a silver chain from his wrist. They gathered nightly around a cracked map of Westeros and whispered of griffins, dragons, and broken kingdoms in need of mending. The boy studied each word as though weighing crowns. When asked his name, he said, Griff, but his gaze flickered to the stars as if seeking a better answer carved in light. Spring's first thaw loosened the next bogs. Arya and the hound splashed through knee-high muck, gnats biting. One dusk they reached a half-sunken weirwood whose carved face had been eroded to faint grooves. The hound hacked at vines for dry wood. Arya circled the tree, drawn by something in the way its blind sockets seemed to follow. At the roots lay a small leather pouch, half-buried. She tugged it free. Inside lay 3 acorns and a stone arrowhead wrapped in gray wool. She kept them, not knowing why. At Castle Black, Samwell Tarly bent over parchment in the library's drafty loft, quill scratching. Dragonglass kills walkers, he wrote, but supply limited. He glanced to the lone shard lying upon the desk, stolen from fist caches. Beside it lay a scrap of ancient text he had uncovered in Valyrian. When the green seer falls, the white shadow rises. His breath fogged. He remembered Jojen's talk of green seers and weirwood nets, and Bran dragging his useless legs through snow. Poor boy, Sam thought, and touched the shard with a shaking finger. Jon Burstyn, cheeks raw. Sam, the king is leaving men here to drill. He wants every ranger ready to ride south against Bolton before the snows deepen. I need lists, food, arrows, horseflesh. Sam blotted the ink. Ride south? With the watch. Not the watch. Stannis's knights. And me. Your vows. My vows tell me to guard the realms of men. Jon's voice cracked like thin ice. Bolton flays the north while the dead gather. If we do nothing, there'll be no realm left. He stared at the frosted window where Ghost's reflection moved like pale smoke. I won't watch another brother die. Sam swallowed, ink cold on his hands. He saw the ghost of Bran staring from that porthole into nothing. I'll make the lists. In the Red Keep's highest chamber, Tyrion Lannister sat across from Oberyn Martell, the Red Viper newly arrived in a cloak of sunset orange. They drank arbor gold while bells tolled dusk. Tell me, imp, Oberyn said, voice smooth as sand silk, why does a city fat with plunder smell so strongly of fear? Tyrion toyed with his cup. Perhaps it senses winter's breath. Oberyn's eyes glittered. Or perhaps it senses that its ruling family has slain wolf, stag, and dragon and wonders who next might taste the lion's teeth. He dipped a finger into his wine, drew a crude circle on the table. Death is a wheel princes think themselves spokes of, yet wheels break. What stands when spokes shatter? Tyrion considered the spread of his own broken family, of Sansa's silent despair, of Cersei's word widow. He drank and wished wine could thaw things deeper than fingers. Roose Bolton marched for Winterfell with a fresh-forged army of Freys, Ryswells, and Dustans. Ramsay met him outside the Shattered Gates wearing a cloak sewn from grey dire wolf pelts. Father and bastard embraced stiffly. Within the hall, Ramsay presented his trophies, Theon Greyjoy, broken, bedecked in chains, a splinter of the heart tree blackened by flame. A flayed corpse nailed above the dais, identified as the last Manderly spy. Roose regarded each with pale interest, then gestured for the banners to be hung white field, red flayed man. That night Ramsay hosted a feast lit by tallow stolen from Winterfell's ruined granaries. He forced the remaining servants to dance barefoot on broken glass for amusement. Roose watched, silent, eyes catching candlelight like river ice. Late, he summoned Maester Qyburn aside. "The north will bend," he murmured. "But snow breaks branches after bending them too far. I must tread lightly." Qyburn tilted his head. "And if the branches sharpen to spears?" Roose's smile was thin. "We prune." In White Harbor's Wolf's Den dungeon, Davos Seaworth stood before Wyman Manderly. The Stark loyalists hidden in the walls breathed hope. Frey emissaries bribed the jailers to watch. Davos kneeled. "Stannis offers justice for the north if you lend your banners." Wyman's jowls quivered with mirthless laughter. "Justice came on mules cloaked in grey, dragging my king and mother's sister dead, sire." He leaned in, whispering, "But vengeance steers a swifter horse." He unrolled a parchment stamped with a Kraken sigil. "Balon claims the stony shore. Bolton claims Winterfell. Freys sup on Wolf's Heart. You propose a new king when my people can scarcely trust crowns." Davos met the Whale Lord's gaze. "Crowns lie, my lord. Honor does not. The Night's Watch writes of dead men walking. Winter is here. Choose who will man your walls. Stannis Baratheon, or the monsters coming for every hearth." Silence. Outside, a gull cried once, the sound swallowed by stone. Wyman's fingers tightened. "Return at dawn," he said, "and pray the seven keep you until then." Davos bowed. When he left, Manderly turned to his guards. "Send for the bakers," he ordered. "We have fry pies to season." South of the waters of Dorne, the shy maid made port at Sunspear. The red-haired washerwoman vanished into alleys where sand snakes waited. "Is the boy what you believed?" Tywin whispered. "The WOM." Varys in disguise inclined her head. "Blood sings true. The realm will hunger for a dragon if ice devours wheat fields." They led the boy, Aegon, through secret tunnels to Prince Doran's solar. Aegon touched the sun and spear mosaic, eyes alight. Doran's gout swollen hand trembled as he reached to greet him. "Welcome home, your grace," he murmured. "The world you inherit balances upon blades of snow and flame." In the courtyard below, the first orange petals of spring detached on a gust and fluttered over the marble like drops of copper blood. In King's Landing, the day of Joffrey's wedding dawned bright, banners snapping in a salt-tinged breeze. Sansa walked between rows of hedge knights resplendent in borrowed finery, gown of ivory silk trailing behind. Ser Dantos darted from crowd to crowd, whispering of boats bobbing in quiet coves. Olenna Tyrell fussed with Joffrey's crown of golden roses, planting a glimmering purple stone at the collar of his doublet. Wine flowed. Mummers capered. Doves fluttered from pie. A single sip turned the boy king's face the color of bruised plums. He clawed his throat, eyes bulging, soundless. Cersei screamed. Tyrion's cup clattered. Amid frenzy, Sansa slipped away, skirts soaking up spilled wine. Dantos joined her in the torchlit serpentine of the cliff tunnels. Above, bells tolled a death knell, below, waves smacked jagged rocks. When they reached the skiff, Baelish waited and missed. Sansa turned once, glimpsed Red Keep towers dissolving in sea haze, then climbed aboard. Olenna Tyrell watched from a curtained balcony as Joffrey's corpse stiffened on a marble plinth. She dabbed her eyes with a lace square, though tears never fell. "Such a sweet boy," she sighed. Beside her, Maester Pycelle muttered senile comforts, failing to notice her gaze flicking north to where clouds towered like white walls. Winter, she thought, will bury fools in south fields for flowers. Winter's first full blizzard whirled across the wall the night Jon Snow ascended the steps of the Lord Commander's tower. In the hall below, men shouted results of the choosing. Jon Snow, Lord Commander by a narrow margin scraped from Cotter Pike's and Bowen Marsh's grudging voices. Jon stared at Ghost's red eyes until the din softened. He recalled Bran perched in the dim rafters years ago, throwing nutshells on the vote's last day, giggling. Bran would have cheered tonight, the ache cut deeper than any sword. Jon knelt at his window, whispered a vow to the dead boy to guard their home. Snowflakes found his lashes, melted warm. On the moors south of Winterfell, the spear of the north finally gathered. Women of Bear Island, riders of Bar Rollins, tall men of the Last River, all beneath makeshift wolf banners. Davos Seaworth rode among them carrying Stannis' pardon for past defiance. On a ridge of dead heather, Lord Wyman appeared with wagons. He lifted canvas to reveal fry skulls baked in crust and spiced with onion. Cheers tore into the iron sky. For the north, they roared. For the Starks, they turned toward Winterfell's distant plume of chimney smoke. Bolton's lookouts spotted the host at dusk. Ramsay laughed eager. "Flay the slowest," he commanded. Roose only watched the horizon, hands steepled. He had received word of Stannis marching from the wall, of Manderly fleets blockading the white knife of Karstark seething. The cracks spread beneath his feet. "A dog's feast is only sweet until the wolves return," Lady Dustin murmured at his shoulder. Roose did not answer, but his eyes drifted to the heart tree's missing stump, the rot creeping unseen. Far north, beyond the Bridge of Skulls, the wildlings broke camp in sleet. Giants lumbered. Mammoths trumpeted. Mance Rayder donned a helm of weirwood painted black. He spoke to Jon Snow at dawn's gray edge, wind flinging sleet sideways. "No seer guides us now, Crow. Only death. Let us choose where to meet it." Jon pulled the hood of his black cloak close. "Die here and become whites. Cross south and be slaughtered by men. Live and fight the real war." Mance's laugh rasped. "You talk like a king." Jon shook his head. "Like a brother who buried too many brothers." They clasped wrists, Crow and Wildling, snowmelt dripping between fingers before returning to their doomed armies. The first White Walker breached Eastwatch by the sea under cover of starless night. It glided over ice shards, spear of frost gleaming like moonlight given form. The guards never screamed, their blood froze in veins before lungs could fill. By dawn the otherworldly host spilled through the ragged gap, moving swift as winter wind. Ravens burst north from every rookery, but cold caught their wing beats and dashed many to ground. One bird, wings ragged, reached Castle Black at dusk, feathers rimed in frost so thick the bird shattered on landing like glass. Only its eyes remained, blue and burning, fixed on Jon Snow where he stood beneath the wall's melting icicles. He read the scrap tied to its leg, Eastwatch fallen. He closed his eyes. In the ringing hush he felt Bran's absence like a missing limb. No dreams warned them. No green eyes looked through leaves. Only silence and ice and the long night unfurling. On Dragonstone's battlements, Melisandre lifted her face to a storm. Snowflakes hissed upon her skin, yet steam coiled upward. In distant skies to the east, a single horned star flared crimson, trailing sparks like dragon fire. She smiled. "The wooden boy is ash," she told the flames. "Now the world will burn yellow and cold until my King of Embers claims it." Below, Stannis clenched the hilt of Lightbringer so hard his knuckles cracked blood. He turned north again. Across the summer sea, Daenerys Targaryen mounted Drogon above the plaza of Meereen's gods. She stared west toward the dark hem of horizon. Two pyramids still smoldered. Her people chanted, "Mysa, Mysa," but their eyes met hers with fear now. They had seen what dragonfire did to men who bore chains. She nudged Drogon higher, felt the wind tear at her braids. "Not fear," she whispered into the black earfin. "Hope or nothing." Far below, the Unsullied unfurled a new banner, a three-headed dragon wreathed in blue flame, wings cloaked in winter snow. Daenerys looked at it, thought of Bran's vanished dreams, and bade her children turn west into the winds of oncoming night. At Riverrun, Brynden Tully presided over a gathering at the Godwood altar. House Mallister men lit candles, Blackwood archers stood watch. He placed Catelyn's bier upon sandstone, swords crossed over her still breast. Atop her shroud he laid a weirwood branch he'd carried from the twins' riverbank, its last crimson leaf clinging. "Here we make fast what Freysa made," he said. They lowered her into the slow-moving river. As torches floated behind, a shape rose from the water's current, a heron at first glance, but as it shook droplets from wings it shimmered to a silent woman clothed in green, eyes blazing. Brynden swore he saw Catelyn open her own eyes, pale as dawn. The heron cried once and vanished into fog. When the torches died, neither corpse nor bier remained, only ripples lapping root-gnarled banks. From White Harbor to Last Hearth, the northern host drove on Winterfell under snow-burdened clouds. Tattered direwolf banners snapped in sleet. Davos rode at Wyman's side, heart hammering each time he glimpsed a child's wooden horse trampled under hooves, tokens of a fallen boy haunting every mile. They breached the outer palisade days later, siege towers clanking. Ramsay met them on the battlements, laughter drifting like ash. Bolton's loosed arrows black-fletched, Freys braced with shields. But the north roared beneath the walls in one voice, louder than thunder, fierce as the last heartbeat of a dying god. The first spear of Bear Island hurled her axe. It spun end over end and struck the direwolf pelt at Ramsay's throat. The bastard reeled. As the Northmen surged, Roose Bolton turned and walked toward the great hall, where Qyburn waited with a small chest of curious design. He opened the lid. Inside, pale blue light flickered. On the wall, Jon Snow raised Longclaw above his head. Firelight glinted off runes. "Men of the Night's Watch," he called. "Brothers of Black. The dead have crossed the sea gate. They march for our fires. We ride tonight to meet them, or we die behind stones that will not keep winter out." Torches lifted. Blades rang. Wildling drums thundered. Jon closed his eyes once, saw Bran standing at the broken tower window, smiling. Then he spurred into darkness, Ghost at his heels, and the gate groaned open. Somewhere in a frozen field north of Last Hearth, Mirari bent over Jojen as the last warmth fled his form. She closed his eyes with shaking fingers, then pressed her palm to his breast. The snow around her steamed. She whispered a single word in the old tongue. The snowflakes halted in air, hanging glittering. A sigh passed through the barrow mounds nearby as though giants roused below. When Mira rose, her own eyes glowed faintly green. She took her spear, set her face south toward Winterfell, and began to run. And beyond every man-made wall, beyond the edge of every map, the white shadow rose unchallenged, for the dreamer who would have seen had long since turned to dust. The night gathered close. Yet in the throats of wolves, on the wings of dragons, in the embers of shattered crowns, the living kindled sparks of defiance. Winter's song swelled, but so did the answering chorus of hearts still beating, stubborn and bright, in a world that refused to slide quiet into the cold. The moon had set, but dawn still lingered beneath the eastern peaks when the first war horn sounded beyond Winterfell's broken towers. Its low, tremulous note washed through the snow-swept fields like a giant's heartbeat, stirring half-frozen sentries on the battlements to rouse from their torpor. Hoarfrost crackled on leather as men leaned over crenellations, squinting into gloom. Ramsay Bolton bared his teeth in delight and pulled his bastard's cloak tighter around lean shoulders. "They finally come," he murmured to the kennelmaster beside him. The hounds below answered with eager snarls, paws scratching at their chains. Torchlight painted Ramsay's pale eyes gold. A predator ready for sport. Inside the great hall, Roose Bolton studied a map pricked with black pins and red threads. Qyburn waited behind him, hands folded over the curious iron-bound chest they had hauled from Harrenhal. A box no larger than a man's torso, fitted with vent slits that leaked a faint white chill. Roose touched one of the slits, withdrew quickly when ice traced his fingertip. "How long?" he asked without turning. "Long enough," Qyburn replied, voice a hush of velvet. "When the outer gate falls, we shall open it. Panic is worth more than 1,000 men." Roose lifted his gaze to the timbers of the hall's roof, imagining the rafters ringing to war cries again. He tasted copper at the back of his throat and wondered, for the first time in years, whether he truly wanted to hear Winterfell's stones sing in blood. But he was a Bolton, want mattered less than will. "Prepare," he said. South of the castle, campfires dotted the wolf host's encirclement like dim stars half smothered by snow. The air crackled with anticipation and sprucewood smoke. Lord Wyman Mandoli rode the length of the vanguard on a broad white gelding, velvet doublet stretched taut across his girth, battle-axe gleaming. Around him trudged women of Bear Island clad in patchwork mail, Karstark halberdiers with frost-rimmed beards, Mandoli spearmen bearing fresh painted wolf banners sewn overnight by washer girls who could scarcely stitch for shivering. At the fore strode Ser Davos Seawith beside the stout Harpoonu Wool, both men scanning the walls for any sign of Stannis's flanking column. They found it by sound first, the hiss of steel on frozen scabbards, the rhythmic crunch of disciplined boots upon crusted snow. From the tree-lean east of Winterfell emerged knights in studded leather and ringmail, their shields painted with fiery hearts. Stannis Baratheon rode at their head, cloak snapping like a sheet of sparks, Lightbringer sending orange halos through the swirling snow. Beside him marched ranks of tall rangers in black, their faces gaunt but eyes burning. At their center Jon Snow walked helmless, long claw sheathed, ghosting silent as a moonshadow at his knee. Davos pressed a fist to his chest in salute as the armies met. Stannis nodded once, a curt gesture heavy with expectation. No banners were raised to greet him, they shared one cause now, and names mattered less than steel and breath. Manderley rumbled forward on his gelding. The time grows thin, he warned. Bolton will see that he stands alone and strike first. Jon studied the walls, remembering them charred on his last ride through these grounds, long before wildling raids and dead men stalked his knights. He pictured Bran racing along parapets in boyish triumph, then always falling in Jon's dreams, though in truth his brother's bones slept far south by now. He heard Bran's voice anyway, faint as wind through brittle rushes. "You must be my eyes now." Jon's jaw set. "We attack at first light," Stannis declared, dismounting. His captains moved to assemble the lines. Snow drifted heavier, dawn would find the field white as shroud cloth. In the dungeons beneath Winterfell, Theon Greyjoy lay curled on a stone bench no broader than his shoulders. Old wounds throbbed. New bruises bloomed where Ramsay's boot had introduced him to fresh amusements the night before. Through iron bars he could spy a corner of the kennels, smell the stink of dog and death. No sound of horns reached this deep, but Theon felt something alive beyond the walls, a slow rising tide of rage. He pressed a shaking hand to the chill stone and fancied he could sense his father's sea far off, calling. Or maybe it was something buried in the roots of Winterfell. A memory, a ghost. "I never meant the boys," he told the dark. "I never meant." His whisper faded into the dripping quiet. A key grated in a far door. Footsteps approached. Light, quick. Theon tensed. The torch that rounded the corner belonged not to a guard but to a girl in a hooded cloak mottled brown and gray. She slid keys from her belt, knelt at his cell, and turned the lock. "Quiet," she hissed, lifting the bar. In the torchlight Theon recognized shards of a face he recalled dimly. "Scrawny girl from the stables?" "No, older now, eyes sharp, hair cropped." "Who? Mira Reed," she whispered. "Your crimes are many. Redemption costs more than chains, but you will guide me through the Godswood tunnels. You know them." Her dagger gleamed. "Answer swift, yes or bleed here." Theon swallowed broken pride. "Yes." She flung the door wide. Beyond the wall, 300 black cloaks stood in ragged formation at the gorge mouth east of the haunted forest. Torches guttered in a wind that smelled of iron and rot. Through swirling snow they saw glimmers of blue fire dotting the hills, moving like will-o-wisps into position. Ser Dennis Mallister muttered prayers. Ed Tollett joked about carving his epitaph into an icicle. Jon Snow's second, Gren, hefted a dragonglass-tipped spear and swallowed. "Never thought I'd thank Sam for being a coward," he muttered. "If he hadn't run from the fist to find that cache, we'd be poking them with sticks." Jon's plan was simple and savage. Hold the gorge long enough for Stannis's banner knights to break Ramsay, then fall back behind the wall and prepare for a siege of ice. The gorge choke point would buy hours at most. But hours were what mortals bargained in when facing the dead. When the first white shadow stepped into torchlight, silence fell like a dropped shroud. It was tall, antler-thin, armor crystalline, eyes radiant with a cold that made the flames gutter sideways. It raised a sword of blue glass and pointed. White surged, silent ranks of wildlings, Night's Watch brothers, Bolton deserters, all re-risen and hungry. The clangor of death meeting life echoed down the gorge. Jon thrust Longclaw into a white's chest. The Valyrian steel flashed, body exploded into shards. Ghost tore a skeletal bare limb from limb, snow blooming crimson. But for every corpse destroyed, two more pressed from behind, driven by the silent command of the others. On a rise above, a lone horn blew 3 chilling notes, wildlings on the ridge signaling retreat to the last fallback camp. Jon glimpsed Tormund Giant's Bane hacking with an obsidian axe, roaring curses. Suddenly a half-collapsed pine slid from the slope, crushing a cluster of whites. One the giant ripped another trunk free, flinging it like a javelin. Still the tide advanced. and overhead the snow thickened, each flake swirling slower as though the air itself froze in awe of what came next. A deep, resonant groan as ancient ice broke. A fissure cracked down the cliff face beyond the gorge. From it crawled a beast of nightmare, an undead mammoth, half flesh, half frost, tusks rimed in blue fire. Upon its neck rode a white walker holding a spear of glimmering crystal. Jon's chest tightened. They would be overrun. "Fall back," he bellowed, voice raw. One of Marsh's trumpets repeated the order. Men scrambled, slipping on red slick stones. Jon fought to the rear, trying to slow the advance, but for every step back a frozen hand grasped. Then a horn blew from the south, one long, brazen blast. Torches appeared above the far ridge, hundreds, then thousands. Riders thundered over the crest, knights of the fiery heart, chainmail ablaze with dawnlight. At their head rode Melisandre upon a black charger, eyes reflecting the inferno blossoming at her fingertips. She flung a jar of wildfire into the gorge. Stannis' men loosed volleys of flaming arrows. The trench below ignited in sheets of green fury. The mammoth shrieked, reared, fell into flame, crushing a dozen wights in final convulsion. The White Walker atop it shattered as crystal meeting forge, shards melting in midair. Jon steadied himself, lungs burning. Melisandre's gaze met his across the cauldron of fire. "Light and darkness," she mouthed. Jon wasn't sure if she spoke to him or the flames that roared around them. Back at Winterfell, the pre-dawn hush broke as the wolf host advanced. Manderly's heavy infantry struck first, shield wall slamming the outer gate where Frey archers spat arrows from the murder holes. Bolton defenders manned hastily repaired gaps in the rampart, their crossbow quarrels whined through the dim, lodging in shields, shoulders, throats. Snow churned red and brown. Atop the battlements, Ramsay shot flaming arrows into the press of wild men and women below, cackling each time his shaft found flesh. From the east, Stannis' knights punched toward the collapsed wall near the burned stable yards. The breach spewed rubble, but the passage opened directly onto a constricted corridor now heavily barricaded. Ramshackle stakes tipped with poison awaited the first riders. A dozen destriers impaled themselves in shrieking agony before the cavalry wheeled back. Stannis ordered archers forward. Flaming bolts hissed into the tangle, wooden stakes smoldered, smoke choking the corridor defenders. Inside the keep, Roose Bolton moved methodically. He stationed Ser Eni's Frey's men in the great hall with shields braced, placed Dustins on roof walks, kept a reserve of flayed men in the godwood where their pale sigil looked obscene among blackened trunks. As he gave orders, Qyburn's iron chest was dragged to the main courtyard. Ramsay joined his father there, face flushed from exertion. Roose regarded his son. "Remember, terror is the blade. Yielding too soon dulls it, wielded too late, nothing remains to cut." Ramsay grinned, licking blood from his cheek. "Then let us sharpen." Qyburn knelt and undid 3 iron latches. A gust of white vapor belched out, curling along the cobbles. In its heart a figure rose, pale limbs stiff, joints cracking. It had once been a Karstark scout, now sewn with hidden dragoglass blades in arms and chest, animated by whatever sorcery Qyburn had coaxed from the remnant shard of an other brought south from Harrenhal. Ramsay's breath puffed in wonder. Roose merely turned away, issuing the signal to open the inner gate when Stannis' next assault pressed inside. Let their vanguard taste the dead, he thought. On a knoll west of the walls, Mira Reed guided Theon through a concealed postern known only to stable hands and to those boys Theon had once hanged for pawns. Remorse twisted his guts as he lifted the latch's rusted bar. Cold air smelled of smoke and iron. They entered a corridor lit by guttering rushlights. Footsteps ahead. 2 Bolton guards. Mira drew a throwing spear and flung it before Theon could gasp. The shaft buried in the nearer man's throat. She pounced on the second, dagger darting. Blood sprayed black on snow as they pulled the bodies into shadow. Theon retrieved a short sword from one corpse. Its weight felt foreign after years of captivity. "Where?" he asked, voice rasping. "To the crypts," Mira replied. "Ramsay flayed the heart tree, but roots run deep. There's old power beneath these stones, I've seen it in dreams." Her gaze flicked to him. "And maybe a way for you to pay your debt." They descended icy steps into darkness thick with smoke from Ramsay's fires. In the cavernous crypts the air carried faint echo of horns from above. Dust swirled around tombs toppled in the sack. Mira halted at the empty niche that once held Lord Ricard. She pressed her palm to a fissure in the floor, whispered words in the old tongue. The stone groaned, shifted. A slab slid aside, revealing a narrow passage sloping deeper. She looked to Theon. "Bran's spirit lingers. The roots remember. I must go alone." She extended a flame to him. "But bring this corridor low when you leave. Collapse it. trap whatever horrors Ramsay kept here. She handed him a small cask of wildfire she had scavenged from a munitions cart earlier. Theon stared, terror and determination mingling. "For the boys," she said softly, meaning the Miller sons he had taken for the Stark heirs. Theon dipped his head, tears unspooling in grime. "For the boys," he echoed. Mira slipped into the tunnel, leaving him in gloom. The outer gate splintered at last when a battering ram fashioned from a felled pine cracked its iron hinges. Manderley's men surged into the courtyard, slogging through knee-deep drifts. The Karstark horn wailed behind them. Ser Hosteen Frey's defenders dropped murder stones from the ramparts. One crushed a bare island shield maiden, spattering red on snow. Yet the Northmen advanced. From the keep's door erupted Qyburn's corpse construct, moving with jerky speed. At first the Northman faltered, thinking it a wounded man, then it plunged a dragaglass shard through the breastplate of a sergeant. The unnatural strength drove blade and rib alike into snow. The knight spasmed, screaming. Others slashed swords, but their steel snapped on hardened frost. Fear rippled through the line. Wyman Manderley bellowed, charging with his great axe. The blade slammed into the creature's collar, severing one arm. Black rime spurted. The monster turned dead eyes upon the fat lord and lunged. A Karstark halberd slid through its spine, spears pinned it from flanks. Finally, one of the island women jammed a splintered torch into its face. Flames licked. The corpse dropped, twitching, and began to melt, shards ringing like brittle glass. Terror shifted to grim triumph. Yet the delay allowed Bolton crossbows to reload above. Volleys cut the vanguard to ribbons. And from behind the north host, horns sounded again, Stannis' knights breaching the southeast corridor at last. Stannis dismounted at the ruined stables, lifted Lightbringer high. Its rosy glow cut smoke like dawnlight. "Forward," he commanded. His knights advanced shield to shield. From shadows scuttled more of Qyburn's constructs, 3 this time, each stitched from multiple corpses, limbs mismatched. One bore half a child's skull fused to its shoulder. Ser Richard Horp screamed as a claws tore through his visor. The smell of cold rot filled the air. An arrow hissed down from the wall, tipped with dragaglass looted off Jon's rangers. It buried in one construct's chest, the creature froze, then collapsed in shards. Another arrow found a second, Stannis' men overwhelmed the third with burning pitch. Knights pressed onward into the great yard where Ramsay himself awaited, sword dripping gore, smile feral. Across the Plaza Davos Seaworth spotted Theon emerging from a side arch, face streaked with soot, a green glow swirling behind him. "Down!" Theon screamed, hurling a torch into the archway. He dove aside. A heartbeat later the corridor erupted in emerald flame, wildfire roaring through subterranean passageways, collapsing stone. The ground shook, one tower leaned precariously. From every crack belched green tongues. Bolton men reeled back. Stannis seized the moment. "Take the gatehouse," he roared. Jon's rangers sprinted across the courtyard, Longclaw rising in Jon's fist. Ghost leapt, fastening jaws on a Fry sergeant. As the wolf tore flesh, Ramsay Bolton's eyes glittered. He advanced on Jon like a dancer, blade circling. Steel clanged, sparks flew. Jon's heavier Valyrian sword jarred his shoulder when it met Ramsay's quick parry. Ramsay laughed, feinting low then whipping high. Jon caught the strike, kicked Ramsay back. Around them battle swirled, a maelstrom of banners and screams. Ramsay retreated 2 steps, spitting blood, then flipped a dagger from his sleeve. Jon saw the throw too late. Theon lurched between, arm raised, blade sinking to the hilt in his forearm. He yelped but did not fall. Jon drove Longclaw forward. Ramsay twisted, trying to pivot away, but the direwolf lunged, ripping through his mail, dragging him down. Ramsay shrieked as Ghost's jaws closed on his throat. Silence rippled outward, sudden, profound. Men turned to witness the bastard's final gurgle as snow soaked red beneath him. From the keep's entrance, Roose Bolton watched with out expression. Qyburn at his side whispered, "It is done." Roose drew in a breath that steamed in the dawn. Then he dropped his sword and raised both hands, voice carrying over the stunned courtyard. "Winterfell yields," he declared. No one moved. Snowflakes drifted. Jon wiped blood from Longclaw, heart hammering. The howls of wolf banners rose, exultant but muted by slaughter's fatigue. Stannis stepped forward, face unreadable. "Kneel," he told Roose. Roose bowed stiffly, knees sinking into stained snow. Qyburn knelt too, still grasping his empty chest. Northmen jeered. Bear Island women spat. Tired sunlight breached clouds, soft gold glimmering on shattered stone. The war, they knew, was far from over. The dead still marched, the Tyrells and Lannisters still clawed for crowns, dragons still circled seas. But a single wrong had been righted. Winterfell belonged to the wolves again, even if no true Stark yet sat its high seat. Then, as if the gods sought to remind them victory was never simple, a tremor ran through the earth beneath their boots. Snow shifted. From the shattered crypt passages behind the keep, a low roar reverberated, part stone-grown, part something older. Men turned, blades raising anew. Mira Reed emerged first, face streaked with sap and tears, carrying a bundle of roots that glowed faintly red at their tips. She staggered, half blind. "The heart," she whispered. "The trees remember." Behind her the collapsed tunnel breathed steam, and from that steam came a sound like distant thunder, footfalls of something vast moving far below, or memories forced awake. Jon moved toward her. "Mira? Where is he?" Her eyes fixed on him, pupils black voids. "He watches," she said, voice not entirely her own. "Through roots, through rivers, through ice. Bran watches." The courtyard hushed. Snowflakes thickened, swirling upward now as if drawn skyward by unseen currents. Above Winterfell the clouds parted, revealing pale blue sky and, for an instant, a sun haloed in icy rainbow wolf colors in cold light. Jon's breath fogged. He didn't know whether to kneel or draw. A crow landed upon the rampart, feathers ruffled. It cawed once, thrice, a pattern Jon could not forget. He lowered Longclaw. Stannis cleared his throat, pulling men back to flesh and blood. "There is no time for mystic riddles," the king growled. He surveyed the scattered corpses, the burning keeps, the pale dead constructs melting into puddles. "We must strike the wall yet. The fate of kingdoms rides on men who still breathe." Jon nodded, but his gaze lingered on Mira. She knelt now, pressing the glowing root bundle into the snow. Steam twined upward, forming shapes, wolves, ravens, dragons, before fading. Her tears left tracks through grime. "He cannot wake," she murmured. "But he sees." Across the yard, Theon Greyjoy sank against a wall, clutching his wounded arm, unmindful of Ramsay's corpse feet away. His eyes found Jon's. In them Jon glimpsed shame, relief, emptiness. For the moment he let it be. King's Landing woke to ash-gray dawn and bells tolling a queen's sorrow. Joffrey's bier lay in the September of Baelor, but no crowds filed past. Plague rumors kept the small folk behind shuttered doors. Inside the Red Keep, Cersei strode the halls wrapped in mourning black. She burst into Tyrion's cell with a flurry of Lannister guards, face streaked with fresh tears and rage. "You killed my son," she hissed. "What did the Starks pay you to poison your blood?" Tyrion, unshaven, merely spread shackled hands. "If I'd known such profit existed, I'd have asked for change in dragons." She slapped him, rings cutting skin. "Your trial comes soon. Pray the gods show mercy." "I shall not." She pivoted out, leaving iron silence. Tyrion touched his bleeding cheek, wondering which god remained to hear prayers of dwarfs and widows. High on another tower, Prince Oberyn Martell observed the river, his daughters flanking him like vibrant shadows. Ships creaked in the harbor. King dead, lion wounded, roses blooming, he mused aloud. Yet snow blows on every breeze. He tapped a finger on the parapet. Time to strike before frost dulls the snake's fangs. In the Vale, Sansa Stark, now Elaine Stone, stood beside a garden pool as autumn leaves drifted on still water. Peter Baelish recited the names of lords loyal to Lord Robert Arryn, each more timid than the last. "With the north in tumult, the Aerie stands pivotal," he whispered. "All corners will court us, we must choose who courts best." Sansa cupped water in her palm, watching it spill through her fingers. She thought of Robb crowned in mud, Catelyn sinking into a red river, Bran's final leap. "Which banner protects the innocent?" she asked, voice brittle. Peter's smile held winter's chill. "Banners protect only those who hold them, sweetling. Protect yourself and the veil will follow." He rested a hand on her shoulder. She did not shrug him off. South of Meereen, Daenerys's fleet of tattered war prizes weighed anchor, prows turning west across the jade expanse. On the flagship deck, Grey Worm saluted the queen as she stepped into Seabreeze, dragons wheeling overhead. Ser Barristan bent knee. Dario uncoiled a silk scarf, tying it around her upper arm. "For luck," he smiled. In the distant Slavers' Bay's fires still smoldered, but new sails filled with promise behind. "Westeros or death," some shouted. Dany touched the rail, gaze-piercing waves toward lands where winter reigned and thrones still bled. "Not death," she breathed. "Life. Or fire." Regal screamed, a sound neither of warning nor triumph but of vast horizons unmet. Far north, beyond the Skirling Pass, the army of the dead paused before the charred gorge. Snowflakes fell upward still, swirling around silent white walkers arrayed along the ridge. In the midst of them, a figure taller than the rest knelt, hands pressed to hard-packed snow. Blue fire coursed beneath translucent skin. When it rose, a shard of black glass pulsed in its palm, the core of Qyburn's unnatural creation torn from the gorge's ashes, still throbbing with stolen magic. The figure raised the shard to the pale sky. Ice crystals radiated, carving new pattern into clouds. A single note, cold as the grave, sounded without tongue or horn. Snow ceased to fall. For leagues in every direction, wind stilled, trees froze mid-sway. Below, the dead began to move again, faster now, limbs no longer stiff, driven by power unmasked. Toward the wall they marched, toward Winterfell, toward every hearth where mortal hearts dared beat. Within Winterfell's godwood that evening, as fires burned the last of Bolton's sigils and Northmen's stacked bodies for pyres, Jon Snow found Meera kneeling beneath the charred stump of the weirwood. The glowing root bundle lay in the hollow where a face once wept sap. Jon knelt beside her. "Tell me," he urged. Meera's lips quivered. "The godwood is wounded, but not dead. Bran's spirit, it touched me. He sees further than walls or graves. He showed me you standing against night with swords of dawnfire. And he showed a white wolf leading dragons across a field of stars." Jon's breath quickened. "What does it mean?" "I don't know." She stared at her hands, crusted with earth and sap. "But east the dragons come, north the dead rise, south the lions rage. All thread in one braid, and the braid tightens." Jon looked at the castle wall where fresh wolf banners hung limp. He thought of Stannis, of the watch, of the faces behind the wall that no dreams warned them of until too late. He remembered being called a wolf once too, bastard though he was. He stood, offered Meera a hand. "Whatever braid binds us, we choose how to pull." She took it, rising unsteadily. Above them the moon slipped behind tatters of cloud, leaving stars brittle and bright. Somewhere in those pinpricks a red comet flared again, faint but persistent, as though the sky refused to forget the day dragons were born anew. Jon watched it, feeling the night's hush-like pressure on his chest. "We must ride soon," he said. "To where?" Meera asked. "Everywhere." Snow began to fall gently now, as if the storm paused to listen. In that fragile quiet, the sound of distant horns trembled through the dark, 3 long notes. Neither Jon nor Meera moved. They knew what 3 blasts meant. Ghost raised his muzzle, howled. Torches were seized. Gates were braced. The north, reclaimed only hours earlier, prepared again for siege, this time from something no castle had ever truly withstood. Amid the flurry, Jon thought he heard Bran's laughter, faint as first snow landing on dead leaves, urging him on. The song of ice and fire, unfinished, swelled anew across fields where brothers bled and banners smoldered. And though the dreamer slept in stone, his memories root deep, river-wide, boundless, stirred the world awake once more.